Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. Have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed we do. Trump making some more wild comments about Epstein and trashing his own supporters. We've also got some reaction to that. Alex Jones is now wondering if MAGA maybe is in fact a cult.
He is asking.
He's going through it. We'll share that with you. We've also got some interesting polling from some Republican pollsters in particular about how people are feeling about all of this. We have some very significant international news. Israel bombing Damascus, an extraordinary escalation there, a really wild situation, complete psyop effectively. We'll break it all down for you, what led to this and what they're saying. Trump is flirting with firing the Fed chair, apparently brought a bunch of Republicans in, reportedly even drafted a letter, but Jerome Powell remains in place as of right now. Zohran sits down with business leaders in New York. Some interesting reaction to that. New York Times, total whiff on another Democratic primary. This is kind of a funny and enraging story all in one. And we're going to have Michael Tracey join us for a little debate on whether or not Epstein was an intel asset. I'm going to play the neutral moderator. Obviously, I'm on your side, but I'm going to try to play the neutral moderator, so it's just a one-on-one rather than stacking the deck against Michael Tracey. But that should be a good one. He's been going in.
I like Michael. I personally think that he's being a contrarian for the sake of it, but we will keep it respectful and we will make it so that look. I just want to lay out the case, and I'll have him respond to what that case is. Personally, I think he's arguing against a lot of straw men. But before we get to that, thank you to everybody who's been signing up and supporting us at BreakingPoints.com. We've got a lot of people coming in on the Epstein story, which we are very, very glad to have you. We're doing as much work on this as we possibly can, and it is great to be back here at the desk. We got some interesting stuff that's coming up. I was on the Flagrant podcast with Andrew Schultz. I think the podcast drops at some point today, and actually I also filmed something with the Flagrant guys, interviewing them about reflections on the Trump interview, promises, some of their criticism, etc. And so that will be dropping later on, and that of course will be dropping first for our premium subscribers. So if you want to watch that, you can go ahead, breakingpoints.com.
Very excited to see all of that.
Yeah, it'll be fun. All right, let's go ahead and start with the Epstein story. So Trump is, at this point, what is it? Quintupling down? Quintupling down. I think quintuple is the factor, the math factor that we're in right now. Basically trashing his own supporters, saying everybody that is interested in the story is stupid, is that they are falling for a Democratic plan, is that the files, to the extent that they ever existed, were actually an Obama hoax. Here's what he had to say.
He's dead, he's gone, and all it is the certain Republicans got duped by the Democrats, and they're following a Democrat playbook. And no different than Russia, and all the other hoaxes. They're started by the Democrats. By the way, I think the biggest scandal, that's the scandal they should be talking about, not Jeffrey Epstein. The scandal you should be talking about is the auto pen, because I think it's the biggest scandal, one of them in American history. I lost a lot of faith in certain people. Yeah, I lost. Because they got duped by the Democrats. The Democrats are good for nothing. They've done a terrible job. They almost destroyed our country.
Would you consider appointing a special counsel to investigate the Jeffrey Epstein investigation?
I have nothing to do with it.
So that last part is very important. First of all, basically saying it's an Obama hoax and I had nothing to do with it. Initially, there was some MAGA cope basically saying, oh, don't worry, he's going to appoint a special prosecutor. Seems to be, basically drifting very far away from that. But I mean, we got to combine this really with the actual Truth Social post that he made yesterday, which really, really trashed a lot of his supporters. Let's put this up there on the screen. Here's what he writes, quote, "The radical left Democrats have hit pay dirt again, just like the fake and fully discredited Steele dossier, the lying 51 intelligence agents, laptop from hell, which the Dems swore had come from Russia. No, it came from Hunter Biden's bathroom. And even Russia scam itself, a totally fake and made-up story used in order to hide crooked Hillary's big loss in the 2016 election. These scams and hoaxes are all the Democrats are good at. It's all they have. There's no good at governing." Okay, I'm going to continue now. "Their new scam is what we will forever call the Jeffrey Epstein hoax, and my past supporters have bought into this bullshit," in quotes, hook, line, and sinker. "They haven't learned their lesson and probably never will, even after being conned by the lunatic left for the 8 long years. I've had more success in 6 months, etc." And he continues, what does he say? "These people want to talk about with strong prodding by the fake news, and the success-starved Dems is the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. Let these weaklings continue forward and do Democrats' work. Don't even think about talking of our incredible and unprecedented success. I don't want their support anymore. Thank you for the of attention to this matter, make America great again. So he talks about his, quote, past supporters have bought into this bullshit about how he doesn't want their support anymore. And I mean, look, the guy's making it as clear as it gets, right? And I think, again, you know, the reason why all this stuff kind of matters and talking about it all week is that the, you know, the prism of Epstein was one in which, you know, Trump successfully, I would say he seized on that along with a lot of the MAGA movement to show everybody how it was outsiders versus insiders. And it was very important, right? Because it fit with the deep state and, you know, the prosecutions that were against him. And it was really like, you know, they're not coming after me, they're coming after you. And these very, very high level people in power. And it was like talking about corruption, and it revealed really in which the way the world worked and how they, the, you know, quote unquote MAGA and the Trump movement and all of that was like this renegade band of outsiders coming in to destroy. And then really what you watch is like the complete flip that happens in their rhetoric and just becoming, you know, new boss the same as the old boss. So I really can't think I can overstate like how important that prism is. Like no one is saying that this is the most important thing, but when you put it all together, when you put, you know, the Iran strikes, the Ukraine policy, the tax bill, so much of the way governance is happening. I mean, look, if you're MAGA or whatever right now, I'm not sure if people know this, RFK Jr. just approved the Moderna vaccine for 6 months old. So I don't see a lot of MAGA people calling him out.
And there's like a big shakeup over there too. Like,
they just fired his chief of staff,
to be
right?
honest with you.
Yeah, the biggest win they have is that people can now drink cane sugar Coke. So congratulations, diabetics. You can now actually drink a can of Coke with 10 more grams or 10 more calories in it. Congratulations to everybody, because apparently that is a great MAGA victory. The other one is they got artificial dyes out of ice cream, because I didn't know that was the problem with ice cream, is that artificial dyes, Krystal, are the problem in ice cream, not the shitload of sugar that are in it that people
ice cream,
are
just
eating.
like one brand of
Yeah,
ice cream,
it's just like, come on, okay? The steak and shake fries, which by the way I checked, have more calories. The beef tallow shake and shake fries have more calories per serving than McDonald's fries. Now I'm gonna have all the seed oil bros in the comments. I don't care, okay? I'll eat the McDonald's fries and the Diet Coke and all of that in the same amount, you know, and we'll compare our calorie content, and then we'll check. Everybody, we'll take blood work and we'll look at our weight. I will guarantee you're going to be fatter and more disgusting if you continue to buy into this stuff. But my point is just like, if you look at all of these things, all these promises, all of this like renegade type behavior from the DOJ to MAGA to all of this like insurgency, like I'm not seeing a whole lot of, you know, like real groundbreaking stuff that's happening right now. And I do think that this is beginning to erode some of Trump's support in some of these disparate coalitions. I will not sit here and say MAGA grandmas are abandoning Donald Trump. That's ridiculous, and that's just not really how it works. But, you know, you didn't win some popular vote and some tens of millions of votes on the backs of MAGA alone. There's millions of people, specifically young people and all those as well, who really did buy into a lot of this vision because they were very upset about the direction of the cultural left. And now I think that they're very much up for grabs. So it's a big political opportunity. I think it's just been very interesting, you know, to see the way that this shakeout of the last 2.5 months has been, in my opinion. I thought Doge would kill Trump, like really politically, but I actually think it's the Iran strike forward that has eroded so much of what people saw in this person. And now, like, the direction is pretty damn clear. You know, your first 200 days or whatever are over. In general, nobody really does anything after this point as president. You're basically just managing more international crises, which worked out well the first time. So I think we can see the direction, you know, that the plane is pointed towards.
Iran, Ukraine, Epstein.
Yeah,
all in just the past several weeks.
2 months.
Yeah. So I mean, that's if you thought that he was going to make good on those promises of no new wars and, you know, we're going to end the Ukraine war and we're going to release the files, you've got to. This has been certainly head spinning. I do want to just pause on what he's actually saying here, because it's easy to just be like, oh my God, this guy is insane and he's just like saying all this wild stuff. But he is now consistently asserting that there are Epstein files. Remember, you know, the memo they put out and said there is no incriminating client list, case closed, it's over, we're moving on. Well, he's indicating there are files, but they were created by his enemies. And so they're a hoax. And it's hard to read that in any other way than he is sort of laying the groundwork to give himself an excuse if things come out that do point to him in connection with Jeffrey Epstein. And the bottom line is he's acting so guilty. And there's really no other explanation that makes sense for the insane way that he's behaving here. Slamming his own supporters, saying, hey, I don't even want your support if you're interested in this, and daring them to defy him. Now, some of them are already going along with it. We watched this interview that John Solomon did with him where he's not oh, yeah, definitely. The Democrats definitely rigged it, against you, and they're definitely inventing things against you. So plenty of people and influencers will actually go along with this line. We'll see how many will ultimately buy it. But it seems very much like he is laying the groundwork to try to inoculate himself against potential damaging information coming out. So that's number one. And number two, as I've been going back through, I know you've been going back down the rabbit hole and I've been looking into, okay, well, what are all the Trump-Epstein connections? And one of the things that I stumbled upon yesterday is this is sort of thing you're like, how is this not common knowledge? It was written up in a British tabloid, actually the tabloid that Ghislaine Maxwell's father had once owned before he died under also mysterious circumstances, wrote up that Trump at age 51 was dating a 20-year-old who he had been introduced to by Ghislaine Maxwell, who it later came out had been an underage trafficking victim of Jeffrey Epstein. Trump dated that woman. And this piece also said that this was not the first woman that Ghislaine Maxwell had introduced him to. I mean, you go back and you look at the quote where Trump says infamously, I knew Jeffrey for 15 years. He likes beautiful women maybe as much as I do, many on the younger side. You can't tell me this man who was a fixture at Epstein parties in Manhattan, who was practically his next door neighbor down in Palm Beach, who Virginia Giuffre worked at Mar-a-Lago. That's where Ghislaine Maxwell met her. You can't tell me he didn't know what's going on, because there were all sorts of whispers and rumors in these circles about exactly what was going on, because he wasn't exactly discreet about it. So when you think about that, then you start to think, oh, interesting that Trump owned these, beauty pageants and bragged about going into the dressing room where the girls were getting dressed. Oh, interesting, he owned a modeling agency, which are known to be hothouses of underage exploitation and abuse. And then you see the way he's behaving here and the way he's trying to give him some sort of out if there is damaging information that comes out. I don't know, guys. Y'all can draw whatever conclusions you want to draw, but the lines are all pointing in one particular direction. And last thing, Saagar, I'll get you to react to this. Megyn Kelly said something interesting too, and Emily actually pointed this out, and I didn't really fully wrap my head around it when she said it. Megyn Kelly said, I have insiders who were telling me that the files were all set up to point directly to Trump. Now, I guess there's a couple ways you could read that. One is just Trump's guilty. Another is she's also trying to indicate the Democrats set him up. They rigged these files and inserted fake information about Donald Trump, as if they, if they were going to do that, they wouldn't release that before he got reelected.
Well, and also, if that is true, then you can prove that that is true and be like, look, they, here's the paper trail of where
here's
things originally were. Or, you could do a retrospective and you could, quote, make the files more fulsome. But yeah, I mean, listen, all of that is public record, basically. I mean, I didn't know about the 20-year-old thing, but the rest of it, it's all of it was kind of baked in. It's yeah, Trump is a sleazy old man. That was basically baked into the public consciousness. I think everybody was willing to be okay, well, at this point, it's pretty clear track record of behavior, the divorces, the tabloid behavior, etc. But his behavior over the last week or so has a lot of people being hey, man, I don't know. This really could be it shows you something. There's a real, there may be something there. And at the very least, it's a cover up of some kind. For what purpose? It could be personal. I personally think a lot of it is intelligence related. When you combine, and it could be a combination of both. I don't know. The intel stuff just makes a lot more sense to me, considering just the rabid pro-Israel direction that we're going in right now.
Yeah, but that would make even more sense if they have something on him.
Yeah,
and that's why anybody who tells you oh, this is a side show and this isn't important and people care about the price of eggs. Of course, people care about other things, no doubt about it. And, we're covering other stories in the show. There are other things going on in the world. If Mossad has pedo blackmail material on the President of the United States, I think we should know that. I think that's probably a pretty important thing to know. So, no, we can't just dismiss this story out of hand, especially after the way that Trump has responded to this in such a bizarre and inexplicable fashion, and is now seems to be explicitly laying the groundwork to have some sort of excuse if something bad does ultimately come out. And let's also not forget that Steve Bannon apparently said previously, going into 2016, that Jeffrey Epstein was the one person who he thought could nuke Trump's presidential ambitions.
There you go. All right, let's go and put the Elon Musk thing up there on the screen. Reply from Elon. Here's what he had to say. Quote, they old, admit nothing, deny everything, make counterclaims, but it won't work this time. And quote, wow, amazing, Epstein killed himself and Ghislaine is in federal prison for a hoax. By the way, Ghislaine's legal team has been citing the government's actions and appealing the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn her conviction. So that's great. Really, congratulations.
And
great work by the U.S. government.
Directly to Trump.
Yes. I mean, she's
Directly
like, hey,
to Trump.
you said it's a hoax. So if it's a hoax, then why am I serving 20 years in federal prison? Great question, isn't it? Let's also get to Alex Jones and some of the, basically dissident, I don't know what you would call it, but people are speaking out and basically saying, okay, Trump, if this is the way that you want to play it, then I'm basically out with you. Here's what Alex Jones had to say. He says, I'm not in a cult.
You people that bring this up don't even deserve to be involved in this movement. You are excommunicata. You are henceforth ex cathedra from the mouth of the God King. You are expelled from the Church of the Holy Golden Toad, Donald John Trump. Well, I was never in the Church of the Holy Golden Toad. I do like you being a maverick, standing up for the country. We have the same enemies. I respect your stamina and courage. Been a big cheerleader when I agree with what you're doing. But if I'm being excommunicated, let me be clear, I was never in your church to be excommunicated. So you can't excommunicate me because I was never in your church. I was never in a cult. And I never said MAGA was a cult. I said a lot of people want it to be a cult.
I was never in a cult, basically calling Trump out, saying, listen, you're like some great God emperor. I mean, in some ways, like, Alex is correct in terms of it was never presented necessarily as a cult, but like, let's be honest about the way this politically has ended up working out and the way operationally it is. I don't know did you guys cover the Ukraine thing yesterday? The poll, which is like when told Trump's decision.
Oh, no, we didn't cover it.
Yeah, this is amazing. Just so people know, this is a new Echelon Insights poll, and it was MAGA voters when asked if, they said, do you support sending more arms to Ukraine? The original answer was like the vast majority no. Then when told Trump supports it, it's Trump's decision, 65% were like yes. I was like, okay, so you actually are in a cult because you're—
We saw the Iran numbers.
And
too,
this
same
is
deal.
where everything surrounds the whole like trust the plan. Like they genuinely only trust Donald Trump. There's no really getting around that. But I just want to caution, again, everybody, and there's a lot of Republicans who are like, look, he can do anything and he can get away with it. I just don't think that that is true at a macro level. And there are a lot of people who are now talking about how Republicans are going to take an absolute beating in the midterms. They probably were going to anyways, even if this was a decent, right enough administration, just because of the way that political cycles work. But now you're really setting it up for demoralization. And it's not, again, not the base, but these lower propensity voters who crawled out of the woodwork to vote for Donald Trump. So many people voted in the last election, never even voted before. Those types of people who were brand new Republicans, and there's always an opportunity every time some candidate's able to bring those people out and then actually convert them into like sustained parts of your political base, they're not coming back, for a variety of reasons. I think Epstein is actually a decent enough reason for one of them, and it connects to so many different tentacles in our foreign policy. But yeah, how is Fox News and other people spinning it? They're like, well, actually, the auto pen scandal.
That's the real.
That's the real scandal. So Trump is like, hey, we need to move on. There's little girls who are dead in Texas. How dare you ask me about Epstein? And that's why the auto pen scandal involving the last president, that's actually the biggest scandal in American history. Let's take a listen from Fox News.
If you care about the Constitution and the rule of law, Trump is right. The auto pen is way more serious than Jeffrey Epstein, because you could have a series of aides here who seized the power of the presidency and used it for their own purposes.
Way more serious than Jeffrey Epstein. By the way, for all of our younger viewers, if you don't know who John Yoo is, John Yoo is the guy who was in the Bush White House who authored all of the infamous torture memos and executive privileges for George W. Bush to expand his authority basically to the levels of a king. So in case you're wondering about constitutionality and the love
expert
of
on the rule of law there.
Yeah. 20 years ago, John Yoo was a household name amongst a lot of Americans because they were like, hey, fuck this guy, just so people know who it is. So yeah, just laying that out there in terms of who they... It's amazing to me how you can whitewash your reputation and 20 years, after authoring these memos and being like a legitimate pariah in American society. And you can, bring your way back and say, hey, by the way, actually the AutoPen scandal is a much bigger scandal than the Epstein thing. I mean, the AutoPen thing, sure, okay, let's talk about it. To the extent that it matters, it's really not about the AutoPen itself, it's about Biden's senility. I'm fine with that. Okay, fine. Let's, Biden's doctor, what did he say? Pleaded the fifth whenever he was before Congress. I agree. That's a huge problem. I'm totally on board. But, in the words of Laura Loomer, who we're about to show up soon, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. The Epstein one actually does seem a lot more urgent for today, considering all of its foreign policy implications. Don't see a lot of people talking about that.
It's one of the first times I really have seen the right and Trump specifically try and fail to change the subject. Usually they're very good at this. They have their media machine. The AutoPen thing's going to be a scandal. We're just going to go in and go in and go in and get people to care about this, and it just hasn't really worked out. So, anyway, you've got that going on. I wanted to run something by you that I mentioned to Emily yesterday, I think it was. This moment for Trump and the way he's asking his base to completely repudiate something they believed 5 seconds ago, the thing it reminds me of most is actually the grab her by the P word moment. Because think at that time, you had these evangelical right Christians who were in the tent, who were a little leery of Trump anyway, Mike Pence on the ticket, and this comes out. And he's asking them to turn on a dime from all of their outrage about Bill Clinton getting a blowjob in the White House and being the moral majority and family values, blah, 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 to turn on a dime and say, nope, this is locker room talk and we don't care. And you know what? They did. They did. Now, there are some things that are different today. Number one, the media ecosystem is different. His coalition is a little bit different.
Very different,
And he is potentially, maybe, a lame duck, depending on whether he tries for his third term or whatever happens there. So there also may be people who are looking past him and thinking there's going to be a post-Trump Republican Party. So that could create a situation that is different. But, that is, to me, what rhymes the most with this moment, where he is asking his own base to completely throw out the window long-held core beliefs just to back him up and go along with him. It's almost like a test, the way that was.
The only reason I think it's a little bit different is that, well, first of all, at that time, they basically had something that he could offer them that nobody else would offer, where he literally said, I'm going to appoint pro-life justices to the Supreme Court and overturn Roe versus Wade, right? So that's pretty different, in my opinion. Also, it's a little different as well because the MAGA...
He's offering them cane sugar and the Coke.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. That's not the same thing. That was their... Look, I mean, at that time, I know it's been a while, that was their number one priority. That's the only thing that a lot of these people voted on was pro-life. That's it. So that doesn't really exist this time around. They can't offer them the same type of thing. Even then, I would say, if you look at the MAGA coalition of 2016, the evangelicals were a small minority of it. They were not the MAGA base. They were the people who came over and were reluctant to come in. Most of it was working class whites who thought the whole story was stupid and bullshit. So I would put it a little bit differently. The Epstein thing, the reason why I think it's different is, look, it's also been a long time since that. When was that story? 2016? So it's been 7 years, right? So since that broke, the internet is pop culture now. It was then, but it is way more.
Now,
It's just different. And that's part of the reason why I've been getting annoyed when people are like, oh, in the real world and all of that. I'm like, guys, the internet actually is the real world to a certain extent in terms of this is the media now. This is where public consumption is on TikTok, it's on Instagram, it's on YouTube. I can guarantee you this is one of the most viral stories that I have seen in years. And that not just on this platform, on every platform.
Yeah.
And, actually, my interview with Tucker has more views than the Iranian president. That's what I'm trying to give people an example of. I've literally never seen. I've got people reaching out to me who I haven't spoken to in 10 years, about this. My point is just that this is capturing the attention of the country. Would I claim that it is, the number one issue or any of that? Again, absolutely not. But, in the same way that you're cartoonishly asking people to move on. And it's also, the other key, the difference is that was before an election. election. That's when shit's on the line. It's between Hillary and Trump. He's got 3.5 more years to go. In a certain way, people who are speaking out are like trying to have a corrective and a push on the administration. So it's actually more like a power struggle in terms of like who gets to set the agenda and who doesn't, as opposed to, look, we have two choices. Sometimes you just got to hold your nose and vote for somebody, like a lot of people also did for Hillary. But yeah, I mean, that's not a terrible comparison. I would really more, I'm trying to think of anything else. And I can't really, because at the same time, you know, he ran on releasing it. And it's not just him running on it, it's the entire MAGA apparatus.
Right.
And
Because
that's what makes it so stark.
If you listen to him,
Right, he never cared that much.
He was always very squirrely.
Yes.
And that Fox News edit is now infamous, where the way they edited his response to will you release the Epstein files was just, yeah. But then he goes, yeah. Well, maybe less so. And then he goes on to give a bunch of privacy, and I'm concerned about this and that and the other, of why he actually probably wouldn't. And he was like, every time he got asked about it, he was squirrely in the same way. But there is no doubt that he flirted with, you know, all of those conspiracies, including the QAnon conspiracy, which was sort of like, you know, adjacent to this. That was like the bullshit made-up version, you know.
QAnon was way dumber.
Of course. Yeah, that goes without saying. But it all becomes, you know, like this idea of Pizzagate, QAnon, Jeffrey Epstein all gets lumped together as like, oh, elite pedophiles, mostly Democrats, are like running the world. And he flirted with all of this stuff. And so he certainly gave people the impression that he was going to be on their side in this. He was going to be the person, the white knight, to ride in and expose all of the, you know, criminals and bring them to justice, whatever. And then people in his movement, like Dan Bongino, like Kash Patel, like J.D. Vance, they were very explicit about the files are going to be released and this is going to be a major priority. And so,
well, he was explicit too. He said it, I think it was in his Lex Fridman interview. He's like, yeah, I'm going to release all of it. He literally said that. I mean, you know, like there's multiple clips of Trump, so the president, the vice president, the FBI director, the deputy FBI director, the attorney general of the United States, multiple, I mean, I can't even think of the rest of the Trump surrogates, if you think about that, like people directly involved in the campaign. Come on now. Like that's part of what makes this so galling.
Well, and the people who, to your point, who are like, oh, this is in real life, nobody cares about this. Are you kidding me?
Totally
Americans don't care about some grand sex scandal involving potentially the president of the United States. You don't think they don't care about that? Have you met Americans and their tabloid?
Were you alive in 1998?
Their tabloid sensibility? I think they care. I think they're interested. I think you've got their attention.
Right. If Lewinsky captured Lewinsky was the biggest story in the country for like 18 months, just so everybody remembers. And also, a little Lewinsky callback, if we all remember, when Bill Clinton got into a war with Serbia to distract the country from the Lewinsky scandal. So these actually can have some pretty big ramifications, just saying.
Before we go on to the other MAGA, I just want to mention that, you know, one more item to put on the list of strange things that are happening in the Trump administration. They just fired the Manhattan prosecutor who handled the Jeffrey Epstein and the Ghislaine Maxwell case. Now, this is Maureen Comey. So it's actually Jim Comey's daughter. Yeah. So in fairness, this is someone MAGA has hated. And she also just handled the Diddy trial rather poorly as well. Yeah. But you still have to ask why she's getting fired now when she is the one who handled both Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein's cases. She was the prosecutor. I
agree that the timing is weird. It's what I told you. I was like, to be fair, like MAGA has hated her for years. They're like, this lady needs to be fired from the Department of Justice. And the Diddy trial is like the best excuse. It's like you totally, you botched the entire case and with the biggest charges against him. You would also say, I mean, if you look at not only the charges of Epstein, but really against Ghislaine Maxwell in the SDNY, like that, in my opinion, is more part of the cover-up than anything else.
Yes.
Because the way that the case was set up was so that it only implicated Maxwell and Epstein and not everybody else. And they focus on these charges from like 1994 or whatever. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think she's innocent, you know, in all of this. But by the way, hey, Maureen, her name's Maureen, right? Yeah, Maureen, you're free now. All right, come, let's talk. Let's give some interviews. All right, don't just shut your mouth and become a resistance hero. If you have some information, tell us what you learned about the pressure from inside of the Justice Department. Won't hold my breath. Last thing here is just about kind of some of the MAGA reaction. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. So we got people like Laura Loomer. She's, of course, standing with Trump. She says Epstein is one issue of many. It's wild to me how many people can't walk and chew gum at the same time. You can ask for answers on Epstein while also not allow it to consume the only thing that you speak about. Trump is doing many great things on a daily basis. He knows how to walk and chew gum at the same time. But let's continue because there are some other examples examples here. People actually, pushing back pretty hard. Here you got General Mike Flynn, who is a former national security advisor. He says this is where his argument went off the rails. It is not about Epstein or the left. It's about committing crimes against children. If he were part of an intel operation known or run by CIA, shame on them, and those responsible must be held accountable. If there's any other country involved, then shame on them as well. If there are elites inside of our country that committed crimes against children, shame on them, and they must be held accountable. Let's go to the next, just to show people. You got some various different MAGA influencers and others. Here you have Trisha Hope. She says, he just called supporters like me stupid who spent 10 years standing with him through thick and thin. This is what he has to say. Well, maybe he is right, because I feel pretty dumb for standing with him all those years, and I won't be doing it again. Hashtag Epstein cover-up. Let's go to another one here. This is from Evan Kilgore. I've been a loyal Trump supporter since 2016. I lost job, friendships, been smeared online, doxxed, press charges on people who have stalked and harassed me for supporting him. If Trump doesn't want my support because I care about the Epstein files, then I'm done. Bye. So you can see, look, again, that's something. I'm not, ready to say yet it's like some gigantic civil war or any of that, but it is certainly having some impact in support for the president. And nonetheless, it's consuming all of tabloid media and of political media at a time when you really would want your attention focused elsewhere. That's a good transition here to the polling, intra-MAGA. So here, I'm pointing a guy named Rich Barris. I've talked about him here on the show before. He is definitely more of like a MAGA-aligned pollster, but one of the things that Rich does, I think, really well is try to keep his finger on the pulse of the MAGA base, of Trump approval, and specifically the Trump coalition. He looks at things very similar to I do. There's the MAGA base, then there's the Trump voter, there's the non-traditional person. All of these people kind of come together and became the Republican Party in 2024, or at the very least, voters for the Republican Party. So here's what Rich had to say about Trump's approval rating, how it continues to go down, and cracks within the coalition. Let's take a listen.
As it stands right now, the voter groups where Donald Trump is now himself starting to hurt with, those are the ones that Republicans need to bring into the fold. And just from the polling this month, here are a couple of groups that need to really stand out in people's minds. 18 to 29 who voted for Donald Trump. Though some of his biggest decline this month came from that group. Hispanic men. All right. The groups where he did increase are kind of funny, Steve. Those who have a 4-year degree or more, right? And that's great. Perfect. That helped offset some of the decline with his core voter and his 24 base. But it doesn't matter because they're still voting Democrat at the generic ballot by 10 points. So, I mean, it's like a pointless bump that's going to evaporate in a month or two anyway, even if it lasts that long. They're just happy he bombed Iran for now, to be honest. And they'll go back to disapproving of him. And what will be left is a weakened base. And that is something that people aren't understanding while they're, again, attempting to browbeat all of these different groups into submission. 18 to 29-year-olds don't care about what's going on all the way around the other side of the world. They didn't vote for him for that. I mean, it's just a reality that people are going to have to start to face. They're simply out of time. They can't afford to continue to carry on with business as usual. They had to convince these voters that they were becoming more like Donald Trump, not that Donald Trump was becoming more like them. They're out of time. I mean, so there are all these people, the clapping seals and the rest of them, they're going to clap their way right into an utter defeat. I mean, that's the reality. And by the way, this month, Democrats took lead on the generic ballot for the first time in our polling since Donald Trump's second presidency began.
I think that's actually a very good way of looking at it all, with the younger voters, with the rest of the types of the coalition. Also, let's think about how there's been a great flip in political coalitions. What did Democrats excel at even before 2024? Winning special elections and midterms. Why? Because it's highly educated, mostly upper middle class people who love to vote and who are much more civically and politically engaged. The rest of the people, the Hispanics and the young guys and all these other guys, more working class folks, they only really pay attention during a presidential election. The rest of the time, they don't give a shit. And that's a huge problem if you're walking into a midterm where, what's the margin right now for the House? 2, 3?
Something like
good
that,
luck.
yeah.
All right. Yeah. Good luck holding on to that one. And the Senate as well actually has its own problems. So what he's pointing out are strips in the political coalition, all of these things that make it not only up for grabs, it will alter the balance of power. I also think everyone in Washington should start waking up to a reality of what does it look like when 1 or 2 houses of Congress are controlled by Democrats. I mean, I've talked about this with Doge, but now with Epstein, any enterprising Democratic politician would be an idiot not to immediately announce an Epstein investigation on day one of the, in 2027. And, by the way, impeachment and all of that, that's already happening. Like, don't even get me wrong on that one. But my point is that the amount of political, institutional pushback, showdowns with the White House, from everything to funding the government, to taxes, to whatever, especially given the attitude of the base, is basically going to be analogous to how the Democrats were from 2006 to 2008 under George W. Bush, when he was also a lame duck president with a very, very low approval rating. Bush got nothing through the House or the Senate at that time.
Yeah.
He was a pariah. They hated him. Congress basically said, screw you on almost every important decision that was happening. That's going to be the political tenor of what those last 2 years look like. They can make your life hell. I mean, every Trump appointee, I hope you have a lot of money, because you're going to be paying private lawyers out the ass when you're testifying before Congress. This is the reality that people are staring down. And the Republicans are just don't seem to care. Well, Trump himself, I guess he never cared, but for personal reasons, if he doesn't even care about the party, your own presidency can be consumed by stuff like this. And that's just looks more real every single day that we go forward.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I think Republicans just pretty much assume they're going to lose the House at this point.
Okay, but you don't have to lose the Senate too.
It's
a big difference.
Could be possible, it could be possible at this rate. I just saw a poll, Virginia and New Jersey have their gubernatorial elections this year, the off year. The Virginia one in particular is typically seen as a bellwether. And you've got a really lame Democrat, Abigail Spanberger. She's like former CA, whatever.
Yes.
Anyway, I'm getting those ads at my house and they're terrible. But
my neighborhood is all in for Spanberger. There's signs everywhere.
Apparently the whole state is, because I just saw a poll that has her up 12 points. 12 points on Winston Sears, who's a current, elected statewide official. So this is not someone
elected Youngkin by 2 points. That's a 14-point swing in 5 years. That's crazy.
Yeah.
All right.
So we'll see how that goes. But I think Abigail Spanberger's got to be feeling pretty good about where she stands at this point. The other thing I was thinking about listening to Rich Barris talk there is, where was Trump's strength? His strength was with low information voters.
Always.
The type of people who aren't listening to this show or watching CNN or even watching Fox News. The type of people who are watching Theo Vaughn's podcast or, Andrew Schultz or Tim Dillon or Joe Rogan or whatever while they're, doing their job or driving the Uber shift or whatever. And to the contrary of the people who want to say, oh, real people don't care about this. This is actually a story that really penetrates pop culture.
It's easy. It's the easiest one that gets
completely penetrates pop culture. I mean, all the late night shows, of course, are all over it.
Shane Gillis hosted the ESPYs last night. Epstein joke brought down
and
the
it
house.
killed.
Yeah, killed.
Yeah, you don't think people know about this? Give me a break. This is exactly the sort of issue that actually breaks through with low information voters, the very people who were the ones who put Trump over the top last time. So, I think there has already been a lot of erosion with Trump among people who are really paying close attention and who were, independents and they voted for him, but they weren't sure about it, whatever. I think you've already seen that erosion. But this cuts deeper because it does go to just pop culture and the sense of this guy, first of all, what is going on here? What are you doing? And why are you acting this way? And what is actually going on? And second of all, you just lied to us to get elected. You betrayed this notion that you're going to be the outsider, come in and clean up things, total and complete bullshit. And look, it has always been bullshit, but this is such a blatant, obvious betrayal of how he positioned himself that it becomes impossible to ignore and to spin if you have a shred of integrity.
I totally agree. Let's also put this next one up here. This is from Mark Mitchell, who works over at Rasmussen. And, I follow these guys because, look, you can say a lot about biased pollsters and all this, but one of the things I like about, following the quote biased pollsters is that some of them actually do have some integrity. And here, this is from Rasmussen, one of the most Republican-leaning polling outlets out there. And here's what Mark Mitchell has to say. Update: looks like Trump approval has bottomed for the second second term. And what he and Rich and these guys are warning about is just the absolute destruction that Republicans face in the midterms. But again, more importantly, for Trump and his coalition in the future, for whatever that looks like. The other thing is let's say that Trump is a lame duck and he's done. Everyone's like, oh, he's not going to care. I genuinely don't believe that. I think he will be the most till the day he dies. He will be a god king of the Republican Party. It would be as if Ronald Reagan, who I guess kept his mind, after he left his presidency and continued to wield his influence. Now, Reagan not only from his own personal issues, but believed in norms, even though I know that's cringe, and was like, no, I'm done. I'm an old man. George, take the reins. You can do whatever you want to do. I'll respect that. You think Trump is going to be sitting down in Mar-a-Lago? Let's say JD gets elected. He's going to have to go down there once a month, all right, to get Trump Truth Socials and all this other stuff to back him up, because at the end of the day, the loyalty does not transfer. We've seen that a million times. There's affection, but not the loyalty. And so for him, like, if you continue to diminish and just bring things down to a MAGA type coalition, you put every future Republican in such a dangerous position where they can't piss off Trump, but to win, they can't also, go in the direction in the loyalty that he demands, which increasingly that seems like what he's likely to do. Of course, could be wrong. Only 7 months or whatever into the first Trump administration. Things can go in all kinds of different directions. Remember, it's only, July? I mean, Biden's presidency didn't really bottom out until October, so there's still a long way to go, It's like...
got a few months.
Yeah, we still got months and months to go, but things seem to be on track, for where we are right now. We don't know what the future looks like.
Yeah.
They need to pray for several things. We'll talk soon about the Fed and all of that. They need lower rates. They need a lot more housing, and they need inflation to go down, and they need the stock market to remain up. They've accomplished, I think, 1 out of 4 of those. So, you need to land the plane, especially in the next 2.5 years, and I just don't see a path forward.
I think it's also, I agree with you that the idea Trump is just going to go away and
ridiculous.
live a quiet life at Mar-a-Lago. Okay, please.
Right.
Look at who this man is. Even if he doesn't technically run for a 3rd term, it will be his party until the day he dies.
Absolutely.
That's just how it is. And the other thing that is, I think, increasingly clear, both as you see, the warring factions over Iran and over Ukraine and now over Epstein, he is the only person who can hold this coalition together.
Absolutely.
He is the only one that can do it. And there's some similarities there with Obama, actually, where he never was able to translate his popularity to other Democrats and over to the Democratic Party more broadly. And I think it's the exact same thing with Trump. When he's not on the ballot, Republicans have been losing an election after election after election. So, the idea that he's going to be able to just bequeath his popularity and his coalition to J.D. Vance or even his own son or whatever, I think that is... There's just no chance that they're able to pull that off.
I totally agree.
Because no one else is Donald J. Trump, and that's just how it is.
Look, remember, Obama literally was like, you need to act like I'm on the ballot in 2016. People were like, yeah, I'm good, actually.
No.
So, I mean, you can try. It basically never works. And it's a very,
Hillary
very
was
important
his choice,
lesson.
too.
Yes,
I mean, Biden
literally
wanted
said
to
that.
run in that election. Obama basically killed that. Biden, I think, at that point, he was at his peak. He would have been a much better candidate than Hillary Clinton.
He had a much better chance.
He did have a better touch with working class people. He was more closely affiliated with Obama that people had, warm fuzzies about at that point. But anyway, I mean, the point is just that he got his chosen successor. He did what he could to put her across the finish line. And it's like, no way. Even though I think if it was Obama who was on the ballot again, he would have probably won.
I've done so many monologues about this. People can pull them from 5-6 years ago. I have all those clips of all the times that Obama was like, you need to act like I'm the person running on the ballot. And people were like, yeah, actually, I'm good. All right, turning now to Syria, some extraordinary developments. Israel bombing the capital of Syria after major violence breaks out in Sawida province. We're going to get to all of the details, but let's just take a look at some of the video. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary. You're watching a Syrian newscaster there broadcasting live from the capital after right behind her you can watch Israeli airstrikes in the middle of Damascus. And by the way, these are not secret strikes like normal. These are claimed and public proclamations from the IDF, including the command and control network of the Syrian General Staff, as well as the Syrian Presidential Palace. So you're watching this is wild, out in the open. And you may ask, so what the hell is actually going on here? Now, I've done my best to... It's very, very complicated, so everybody stick with us in terms of the exact TikTok of how this all went down. We got to start at the very, very beginning. You'll remember that the Assad regime fell. Well, after the Assad regime fell, the Israeli government claimed a, quote, indefinite presence inside of Syria past the Golan Heights, further expanding their borders. Basically, the justification was they need to protect their own border at the Golan Heights, as well as the Druze population, who they have long had a close relationship with. Okay, so let's put things out that way. That's ever since the Israeli government or the Assad regime fell, and now the new power, Al-Qaeda, is in charge of the state. After Al-Qaeda kind of came into power of the state, there has been a tacit alliance between the Israelis and Al-Qaeda. They met recently. There was supposed to be normalization between the two governments. Much of the sanctions from the U.S. government were taken off. So everything seemed to be on a road of normalization and of a tacit agreement where the new Al-Qaeda government is going to recognize Israeli sovereignty over this new portion. All right, so let's start there. However, the Druze population, of course, is allied with Israel, and there's also been calls within Israel to basically further their attacks on the Syrian government, and all of this kind of came to a head in the last couple of days. So let's start with this. Let's put this up there on the screen. So late on July 11th, Bedouin gunmen ambushed a vegetable truck on the Damascus-Suwaida highway, beating the driver and stealing the truck and its contents. The next day, Druze gunmen kidnapped 8 Bedouins as retaliation, triggering the Bedouin gunmen to kidnap 5 Druze in response. By the way, this is what a lawless state looks like. So next, July 12th, saw a flurry of, quote, tit-for-tat kidnappings amid attempts by local notables to negotiate a calm down. Tensions and conflict between these clans and the Druze date back for years, tied to drugs and the weapons trade, control of smuggling routes, and land ownership. On July 13, negotiations break down. Armed conflict erupts in Suwaida between Bedouin clans and Druze militias. Druze militias start getting shelled. Bedouin areas are besieged. 30 people are dead. 100 are injured in 24 hours. All right, now continuing. On July 14th, after attempts to mediate talks, Syria's new government intervenes. These are Al-Qaeda forces, right? Deploying military and interior ministry forces into Suwaida to, quote, enforce order and put an end to the internal fighting. Then, as these new government forces, the Al-Qaeda forces, enter the city, they are ambushed by the Druze militiamen. 10 soldiers are rounded up, executed, and used for celebratory photos, and 8 other soldiers are taken hostage, stripped and marched to a nearby village in their underwear. All of them are believed to have been dead now. That's when shit really kicks off. Intense fighting ensues. Government forces advance into the city. The Druze militia starts shelling the Bedouins, killing a child, apparently, a photo of which gets sent around everywhere in terms of anti-Sunni mockery. This is all according to Charles Lister. He's a long-time Syria analyst, and he speaks the language as well and has translated all this. Then what happens is, quote, as fighting rages on, Israel begins drone strikes there, first targeting the Syria militia armored forces and pickup trucks of the Interior Ministry. So eventually what happens is there's a negotiated ceasefire on July 15th between the Druze, the Christian, the Civil Council, who invited the government forces to secure order. However, one Druze cleric, I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name, he is allied with Israel, and he's the person who's like, no, we're not doing that. And that's when the Israeli strikes start to go into full effect. Israel strikes not only the Syrian government, basically saying, hey, I'm the boss here. You do what we tell you to do. So some Druze IDF soldiers and others start flooding to the Israeli-Syrian border. They tried to smuggle weapons and to go into Syria. To basically what they were trying to do is instigate like a full-on rise-up and have complete autonomy over there that Israel has control over. Many of them were actually raising the Israeli flag over the territory. So this is all, the reason I went through exactly that is if you were looking at the Israeli version, you're like, oh my God, the Syrian Al-Qaeda forces just came in and they're massacring all these Druze. It's a little bit more complicated than that, isn't it? Because they came at the invitation of the interior forces, but this one Druze cleric and militia leader who's allied with Israel was like, no, we're not doing that, and actually we need Israel to come in and show the new Syrian government who's boss. All of that escalates to the point where they're, bombing the presidential palace. Now, let's just diminish this. They're like, oh, we're doing it to prevent, they literally said, we're doing it to prevent a genocide. Assad killed how many people in Syria over the last 15 years? How many hundreds of thousands were slaughtered? Okay, you didn't do anything at that point. Like you give a shit about humanitarian situation in Syria. Give me a break, all right? This is about control, it's about territory, and really, it's about telling the Syrian Al-Qaeda government, you answer to us You don't even get to, you're not even allowed to enter our allies' territory without us coming and bombing the shit out of your capital city.
The crazy thing is that this Syrian government had already basically been like, you're right, we answer to you.
Exactly.
You can take over the Golan Heights.
But it's not enough.
The guy who leads Syria now is literally from the Golan Heights.
I know.
And he's like effectively ceded the territory to Israel. I mean, there's a reason why the Trump administration dropped the sanctions on him and redesignated HTS, which was his organization. It's like, oh, they're totally not terrorists anymore. It's because they were playing ball and doing everything that America and Israel wanted them to do. But it is still not enough for the Israelis. They want it to be a completely failed state. They want to be able to take over and cede whatever territory they possibly can. And so they're using the pretext of this effectively like ethnic strife, which is apparently the tensions between the Bedouin and the Druze in this area is in fact longstanding. Now that you have this also, civil war now leading to this takeover and this power vacuum, I'm sure that creates even more possibility for escalation of that ethnic strife. And so they're using that as a pretext to come in and just directly bomb Damascus and bomb the Syrian government. It's crazy. On the, what was going on there with the government negotiations and them coming in and trying to assert control. I mean, you have to keep in mind here, this is a new government. They are trying to assert control over their territory.
Right.
So they come in, they actually negotiate. There were multiple ceasefires that were negotiated that everyone agreed to except this one dude
who's
who
pro-Israel.
seems to be the Israeli plan. And then as soon as he blows up the negotiations, lo and behold, Israel comes in with their bombs. So that's the reality of what's going on here. And yeah, I mean, the lesson you have to take is like, there's no working with these people. There's no, even if you give them everything that you think that they want, things that should be really outrageous and off the table, even if you do that, it does not matter. So what is this now, the ninth front in the Israeli war? And I have seen some people even who are like pretty pro-Israel being like, what are you doing? Like, we were with you when you were bombing the Palestinians because they're obviously evil and hate you, whatever. But like, what is going on here? How does this make sense? How is this at all justifiable? And the truth is, because they completely act with no accountability, with utter impunity, they just feel like they can take over and do whatever they want because they have been able to do that up to this point.
Yes, and that's the point. The point is that, look, no one's saying this is a brand new front war. The point is just that they are allowed by us to come in and do whatever they want to do to every single one of their neighbors. And we're going to back them up. And if you want evidence of that, here's the response from the U.S. State Department, where they call on the Syrian government. By the way, they're the ones who recognize the government, and they tell the government, you need to withdraw from your own territory so that we can reach a negotiated solution. Let's take a listen.
Has the U.S. asked Israel to halt strikes on Syria?
I cannot speak to specific conversations or the exchanges diplomatically. And we are calling on the Syrian government to, in fact, withdraw their military in order to enable all sides to de-escalate and find a path forward. And I think that that's obviously the goal because of the nature of what's happened and the secretary's phrasing that this was a misunderstanding. He's optimistic that this can be achieved.
So you said you're looking for an Israeli withdrawal and a Syrian government withdrawal from the area. Can you be more explicit about
No, I can't.
Right, so, okay. Got it. And let's go ahead and put Netanyahu's statement up there on the screen. He says, my Druze brothers, citizens of Israel, the situation in Sueda and Southwest is dire. The IDF air forces are in action. We are working to save our Druze brothers and eliminate regime gangs. I have one request for you. You are Israeli citizens. Do not cross the border. You are putting your lives. Remember, I was telling you there were a lot of Druze who were crossing the border with weapons, by the way. Some of it appeared to be facilitated by the IDF, but they're like, oh, actually, you're hindering our efforts, basically saying, don't go there because actually we're bombing it right now. Here we have Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who was asked about it, and his response is, look, this is a centuries-old conflict. That's what this is all about. Let's take a listen.
I think I'll ask Marco to say a few words on Syria.
Yeah, it's complicated, obviously. These are historic, long-time rivalries between different groups in the southwest of Syria, Bedouins, the Druze community, and it led to an unfortunate situation and a misunderstanding, it looks like, between the Israeli side and the Syrian side. So we've been engaged with them all morning long and all night long with both sides, and we think we're on our way towards a real de-escalation and then hopefully get back on track in helping Syria build a country and arriving at a situation there in the Middle East is far more stable. So in the next few hours, we hope to see some real progress to end what you've been seeing over the last couple hours.
Centuries-old conflict. It's like, guys, as I just laid it out, it's actually not complicated at all. You know, it's really not. It's like what happened is yes, there was some fighting, and then this pro-Israeli guy said, no, I don't accept that, and asked the Israeli government, which they did, to send a message to the new Syrian government that we're in charge, actually, of your country. I mean, I don't know. It's like, who do you even root for in this? You got Al-Qaeda on one side, you got IDF on one side. I'm like, okay, well, glad I'm complicit in all of this, you know, because it's just so ridiculous. And by the way, on top of all of that, Bibi Netanyahu is on trial in Israel, you might forget. Don't worry, the United States actually sent our ambassador, Mike Huckabee, to the courtroom to express their support for Netanyahu's government. Extraordinary. Let's put this up there on the screen. What do you think he did whenever there were strikes on Syria? He said, hey, guys, I'm involved in this military operation in Syria, and that's why the trial needs to adjourn. Oh, got it. And by the way, it's only the fourth time or so now that you have had the trial postponed because of military action. And I'll read some headlines. June 26, 2024. Prime Minister's lawyers tell court Netanyahu can only testify in a corruption trial later on in March of 2025. Prosecutors cancel Netanyahu's testimony in corruption trial amid renewed Gaza assault. March 18th, 2025. Court lets Netanyahu skip testimony next week for U.S. trip. July 2nd, 2025. July 17th, 2024. July 16th, 2025. Yesterday, trial adjourned because of strikes on Syria. So, look, doesn't take a genius to figure out what's going on here. Really glad that that's something that we're all signed up and supporting. And lastly, let's put this on the screen here from Ben Gvir, part of the Netanyahu coalition, who sends here, they want to, quote, eliminate the Syrian president. The only thing to be done with Jolani is to eliminate him. We need to eliminate the head of the snake. Keep in mind, this is the same leader who has already given Israel everything that it wants, who is open to normalizing relations, open to coming into the Abraham Accords, somebody who, you know, and this is where I don't even want to sound sympathetic to Al-Qaeda, but like, if you're a part of the new Syrian government, wouldn't you think that you have then sovereignty over your territory to, you know, restore order whenever there's something that's breaking out there? You might think that, but no, the Israelis are like, no, we rule your country, not you.
Well, so, and again, they weren't even really trying to assert authority over all of their country.
Correct, yeah.
They were like, okay, Israel, you can have that piece. We'll be over here. But even that wasn't good enough. I'll just close with this. There was a good quote here from an expert who said, listen, Israel's demanding that they withdraw their troops further, obviously. Yep. And the paradox that creates for them is pretty obvious. If you withdraw, then you just effectively announce Israel controls the country, and you fail in your bid to try to assert sovereignty even over the pieces that you haven't already ceded to Israel. And if you don't, then they're going to keep bombing you, and then that obviously threatens your ability to hold on to power at all. So that's kind of where things stand right now. And
really great
just
situation.
Really, you know, very fortunate for Netanyahu, the way these things keep coinciding with his trial date.
He's the luckiest man in history.
Isn't that interesting?
It really is. Okay.
All right, let's go ahead and get to the machinations over the Fed chair. So Trump has long expressed in this administration his upset with Jerome Powell, who he initially was the one who put in at the Fed, by the way, which is going to become relevant during this block. So in any case, apparently he gathered a bunch of Republicans in the Oval Office this week. He reportedly drafted a letter announcing the firing of Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Asked the Republicans in the room, hey, should I do this? According to Trump, they all were like, oh, yes, Mr. President. Yes, sir. That sounds like a great idea. He has not moved forward with that whatsoever. So in any case, he got asked a question about whether or not he is going to fire Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Let's go ahead and take a listen to what he had to say.
He's a terrible Fed chair. I was surprised he was appointed. I was surprised, frankly, that Biden put him in and extended him. But they did. So, no, we're not planning on doing anything. We're very concerned. And that goes for his board, too, because his board is not doing the job, because they should try and rein this guy in. So he's doing a lousy job. But no, I'm not talking about that.
So he says there Biden put him in. Biden did not put him in. He put him in. Whatever. He says there he's not planning on doing anything. So maybe this was like kind of a trial balloon. Maybe it was an attempt to distract from other things like Epstein that was going on. But we can put the reporting about this draft letter up on the screen. According to the New York Times, he penned this letter to fire the Fed chair. He asked Republicans if he should send it. The president, they say, waived a copy of a draft letter firing Jerome Powell at a meeting in the Oval Office with House Republicans. Remains to be seen whether he follows through with that threat. And then The last piece here, Saagar, is while this was all swirling, and it seemed like more of an active possibility, there was a pretty significant market reaction, especially with regards to the value of the dollar and also the bond yields, both of which are, significant and important. And so it's possible this was like a trial balloon. Markets freaked. He decided not to do it. Like I said, it's possible it's a distraction. I don't know. What do you make of all this?
It's complicated. As in, I do think that Wall Street worships at the altar of the Fed in a very unhealthy way and have fetishized this whole idea of central bank independence.
Yeah.
I understand why Donald Trump seems to be an unreliable actor through which he would not want to break that norm.
Yeah.
That said, the argument is sound in terms of he's out of step with the rest of the entire world's central bank cuts. If you look at where the rates are right now and the labor market, inflation, and all of that, et cetera, your reaction is not working if you want to look at the core economic problems of the American people. So, one of the main reasons that buying a house right now is just exorbitantly expensive is because of where the rates are. We have not had a rate cut, or at least a substantial one, in multiple years. A lot of people who wanted to refinance in the future are getting hosed. A lot of people are having to sell for much less than they wanted to. It's one of the main barriers to entry. It makes the average mortgage payment double what somebody who got a rate, 4 or 5 years ago. I can sympathize, with all of that. It also makes, the carrying cost of business very difficult. People cannot finance expansion at such high rates. There's a lot of different effects that the rates and all of that have. So it's really one of those where I'm not sure there's two heroes on either side of the story.
Yeah.
If you look at it, we had supply side inflation under Biden, and the Federal Reserve was okay, well, we're going to crush the demand side. I just disagree with that fundamentally, because I think they look at their mandate in a very different, in the way that Wall Street and all of them want to, an old school economic theory that, in my opinion, does not account for the way that real markets and the real world work. So I think they've done more damage than they have good.
I agree with a lot of that. Trump wants them to cut the rates by 3 percentage points.
Which would be
That
awesome.
seems crazy.
Seems awesome.
That seems wild.
Yeah.
And I guess I feel about this sort of similar to how I feel about the term limits conversation, where it's in general, I don't support term limits, but I'm glad they're there right now with Donald Trump. And I kind of feel the same thing with the Fed chair. I actually think that president should be able to, have their choice in there and have the Fed policy, monetary policy reflect their agenda and their view of the economy. Do I trust that power in the hand of Donald Trump? No, I do not. So that's kind of where I am. And, I do think if he decided to fire Jerome Powell, I do think there would be a significant market reaction, because they are very attached to this idea, and they also have no confidence in Trump putting in someone there who would be remotely responsible.
That's the problem. But this is where I want people to think a little bit differently. It's look, it's not in the Constitution that the Federal Reserve is this holy sepulcher of, separate part of government. And if you went back in time, people would say it's preposterous that you have this separate independent bank, unanswerable to the public. If you look back at some of the things, the Volcker, Jimmy Carter situation, it was insane.
Yeah.
It's 19% interest rates or whatever, and the president was I don't even agree. He appointed him and then, basically ruined any chance of him ever getting elected. And take the political stuff out of it. If you want to work and have some sort of democratic say in your economy, having an independent central bank is probably the worst possible way to do that. It's basically a giant, insurance scam and all of that for the global financial system. That's fine. Their argument is oh, well, that trickles down to all of you. I don't agree with that, at all. The housing situation is perfect. So look at the people who are getting crushed by rates. Look at the people who worship at the altar of this independent Fed and all of this. And it's mostly Wall Street, bond traders and others. But yeah, that's the Trump factor, as in his, chaos and capriciousness makes it so that if he were the one to do it, even though, again, I think it's a sound enough idea, democratically, it would cause tremendous market reaction and pushback, which I think he would come to regret if it were to ever happen. But he's socializing the idea on Congress because he wants Powell to resign. He wants him to go away.
Yeah.
And, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I don't know. He's stuck. And by the way, as you said, he's the one who appointed him, so why'd you do that?
Right.
You know?
Even if he wants to shift it off on
Why'd you
Biden,
do
it's
that?
like, dude.
Yeah. You appointed him.
Some of us do have brains that have memories that longer than that of a goldfish.
Totally, I was there.
Sometimes
I literally
do.
remember whenever
Sometimes
he was. I remember whenever he was nominated, and especially because he immediately started criticizing him almost after he nominated him.
Yeah.
Like a year in, it's like nothing has changed. Even at that time when we had lower rates, he wanted them to go even lower. So that Trump is a real estate guy. I get it, but I do actually think a lot of the country would be on his side. Most people don't necessarily understand Federal Reserve and all of that, but this is, again, you know, if you wanted to make a case, if Trump were to give a grand speech and be like, all of you are paying too much in your mortgage prices and I want all your mortgage rates to go down and that's why I'm firing the Fed chairman, it would be very popular, but, you know, they don't have the message discipline or the, you know, or any of that to actually be able to sell that idea. It would fall, and nobody on CNBC is going to be articulating that either. They're going to be, oh my God,
well,
freak out.
One last note on this, and I think I am remembering this correctly. So the Supreme Court recently ruled that Trump could fire some of these other, like, sort of supposedly independent, I think it was maybe at the CFPB, officials. But they explicitly tried to write their decision such that they were like, but the Fed is totally different.
Yeah.
So I think he also would probably run into some legal issues. Now, as we've seen with this administration, they just act first and worry about the legal consequences later. And that has been a strategy that's been very effective for them because the Supreme Court, in almost every instance, on the shadow docket where they can just, instead of actually ruling on something, just say, well, you can do it for now as these things work out. They have ruled sided with Trump in almost every instance where that is concerned. So in a sense, they could get their way at least for a while. But I think also ultimately, probably the Supreme Court, being as corporate friendly and business friendly as they are, would ultimately come and say, hey, this is too far. You can't actually do this.
Yep, I agree. Okay, the next part.
Let's get to Zohran and his big meeting with business leaders.
Yes.
So as we have now moved from the New York City Democratic primary into the general election, Zohran Mamdani had a big meeting this week with business leaders in New York City. Some pretty interesting commentary on that from MSNBC. Let's take a listen.
They heard a really charming, affable guy who was well prepared. He made jokes, he made self-deprecating jokes, but they did not hear someone who changed his policies. And so if you had concerns about his economic policies going into the meeting, you had the same concerns going out. For some people, the charm and his disarming nature was enough to calm people a little bit. For others, the fact that he was very much sticking to his policies further enraged them. So there was a bit of a division coming out of the room in terms of response. But in the room, it was mostly cordial. It was mostly pleasant. There was one quite pointed question effectively saying, how can you tell us you're not going to drive business out of New York? And he danced around it a bit. I think his message was, I believe strongly in my policies, but I don't think they're bad for business. And I think many of the business leaders saw a little bit of a disconnect in how you connect those two dots. But overall, they found a nice, charming guy. And they were, you know, they appreciated the fact that he wanted to meet with them.
But he also enters a race here where the setup seems to really favor him. First of all, anytime you have a D next to your name, you're the Democratic nominee in a deep blue city, that is helpful. He's got that. But if Andrew Cuomo and Eric Adams both persist in this race and are both vying for the same sort of centrist vote, they split that. That only helps Mamdani.
The fact that he's in makes it highly unlikely that Zohran does not win. I talked to some people last night who were part of the partnership meeting, and they were relatively impressed with Zohran. They had very serious concerns, and they were impressed. He's very charismatic, which we found. He came twice to National Action Network, and some of them agreed with him, some disagreed, but they say he's a lot more personable and more informed than they thought.
Apparently, at that meeting, the CEO of Pfizer had asked him a question about, well, what about globalized the Intifada? Which it's just worth reminding everybody.
Wait, the CEO of Pfizer? Why do you give a shit about?
I know.
Yeah.
This
Like,
is your question, right?
Yeah.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
And also, just as a reminder, because he's been lied about so many times, he never even said that. He got asked about the phrase. He, quote unquote, refused to condemn it. Apparently in this meeting, he said he would discourage its use, which is basically what he said from the beginning. I mean, it's insane to me that out of all these people, he's the controversial one. Andrew Cuomo had to literally resign and disgrace Saagar after killing grandmas in a nursing home. And
well,
then
no, that's not why.
lying and covering it up.
Yeah.
And I mean, the real reason he was pushed down and had to resign, to your point, was like, what, 11 different women accused him of sexual harassment.
He's just Italian.
Curtis Sliwa has a new line of like, he was spanking fannies and killing grannies.
That's good. I like that. It's also, by the way, accurate. This is actually true.
Was indicted on federal corruption charges, has a 20% approval rating in the city. I lost track of the number of members of his administration who were under indictment or being federally investigated. His former police commissioner has just accused him of running in court, of running the NYPD and City Hall as if it is a criminal enterprise. And Zohran, that's the controversial one? Okay, sure. Kathy Hochul also, I believe, stopped by Morning Joe to get asked these very similar questions. Let's go ahead and take a listen to her, too.
I'm going to make sure that we have a climate where businesses can thrive. They create jobs. They give us the revenues I need to be able to have very generous social safety net programs. Everyone is having a hair on fire moment. And I said, let's just calm it all down. I've spoken to hundreds of business leaders saying, listen, nothing is going to happen to this city without me being aware of it and involved in it. So don't talk about packing up and leaving and all these other, overreactions. We're going to be okay no matter what happens.
So there you go from her. And interestingly, she's actually facing a primary challenge. Zohran is pushing, of course, for the top tax, for hikes on the top tax bracket. Hochul has said absolutely not. Her primary opponent is saying yes. And so that is actually becoming a core issue in terms of the New York primary. But again, he is the Democratic nominee. There is a democratic process. People voted.
Yeah, he won.
He won by 12 points. He completely changed the electorate in a way that you think Democrats would be like, that's great. How could we do more of that? And instead, they just don't know what to do with, don't know whether to endorse, don't know what to do with this guy. And a new poll just came out. I mean, he's winning, first of all, for the general election. But also, rank and file Democrats, the people who vote in the city, they're overwhelmingly positive about him. There's no question about it. And his favorability with young voters is off the charts. And the other guys are dramatically underwater and hated. So it's just such a crazy situation to me.
Yeah, especially with your point about what's controversial and what's not. It's okay, the tax thing. I mean, by the way, New York, you guys should think about it because, your whole tax system is relied on taxing the super rich. So if even 12 people leave, you're actually screwed. You should actually really reform the way that you guys do that. That's just my opinion. Also, I was just there for Flagrant, the subway, shithole. I'm just going to say it. It was the day after the floods that came in.
Crazy.
The entire platform, imagine waiting in the platform. Everybody is soaked already from the humidity, and the platform itself is steaming from all of the flood water. And we're all crammed in there together, and then you walk into the AC, which you think will be refreshing, but actually what happens is now your entire body is covered, and your suit and everything is wet, and you absorb the sweat off of another person onto yourself. That was my experience yesterday in the New York City subway.
Been there.
So we've been there, but it's one of those things where this is not great, okay, in terms of the flooding situation. Didn't enjoy it myself, and so that just shows you the rank and file, the stuff that actually animates people. That's really what matters. Also, I did check, and Zohran is right. Halal, too fucking expensive. All right, I went to the cart and I said no. I don't have any cash on me. The guy's not taking a card or whatever. And it's $12, $13. Sorry, it's too much.
Man,
it's too much.
I miss New York so much. One last piece here on the Zohran business leaders because this was just too funny. Put D3 up on the screen. This tweet just really sent me. So this lady says, tough meeting for Mamdani with the Partnership for New York CEOs today, I'm told. Stood his ground on intifada language and wouldn't commit to keeping the New York PD Commissioner Tisch, whom this crowd likes, in the job. Also, didn't recognize her dad, Jim Tisch, when he rose for a question. How dare he not recognize a Tisch when they rise for a question? I know a lot of people out there in the comments were saying, I'm a single issue voter, which is, can you recognize Jim Tisch when he stands for a question?
I didn't realize that the NYPD commissioner is part of the Lowe's dynasty.
Yeah, they're one of the
this is actually wild. I didn't know that.
One of the wealthiest families in the country.
Okay.
And so they were offended that how dare he didn't have his billionaire who's
I wouldn't recognize
book
either, so.
Facebook in front of him. Anyway, so that's how things are going in that race.
That's New York. New York. Great,
all right, let's go ahead and get to this debate with Michael Tracey over Epstein and whether there's any there on some of the various conjecture about what was really going on. That starts right now. Joining us now for a little friendly Epstein debate, friend of the show, Michael Tracey, independent journalist, and you can check him out over at mtracey.net. Great to see you, sir.
Always a pleasure.
Yes,
Good to see you, Michael.
Absolutely. So I said this before, but even though like everybody knows I'm more on Saagar's side on this, but I'm going to try my best to play the role as neutral moderator so that we can have a one-on-one and you're not getting just teamed up on by both of us on this whole thing. But you recently wrote an article that takes apart some of what you described as the Epstein mythology. This is for Compact Mag. We can put this up on the screen. The headline here is the idiocy of the Epstein mythology, and you've been very vocal on Twitter, now X, as well, in taking apart what you see as some of the more tenuous theories surrounding Jeffrey Epstein. So before we dive in, I want to sort of level set with you, Michael, of what do you think is going on with Trump right now? Why is he acting the way that he is around Jeffrey Epstein and, ran on releasing the files, and now he's not going to release the files, and there are no files, and now, yes, there are files, but they were written by Obama, and screw you, and I don't even want you to be a supporter if you believe any of this nonsense. What is your assessment of, what is actually happening here?
Well, there's no doubt that the Trump administration has embroiled itself in a PR fiasco of its own making, I would argue. I slightly tongue-in-cheek say at the end of that article that I do think that there is a genuine trafficking conspiracy for people to get upset about. And it's that so many people in the Trump orbit trafficked in nonsense for the past several years, namely Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, et cetera, when they spent their time tantalizing their followers with these teases about how there was going to be some explosive revelation once the second Trump administration got in power and vanquished the deep state. And by natural extension of that, of course, the quote unquote Epstein files would be released because it was the satanic, demonic Democrats who were, for some reason, covering up all the damning information to protect their donors and friends and allies, because Democrats in this Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, Rumble universe imagination are perpetually covering for pedophilic sex trafficking networks. And Trump was occasionally asked about this when he would go around on these ass-kissing podcasts during the 2024 campaign. And if you go back and look at what he said, he would often be a little bit equivocal or non-committal. He would say, yeah, sure, maybe we'll look into releasing the Epstein files. But it wasn't as if Trump went around campaigning on this issue of his own volition. It's just that part of the 2024 Republican campaign strategy, which I thought was very clever and effective, was to tailor a message to audiences who consume this kind of media, meaning the Joe Rogan Network and kind of related podcasts that I would argue have conspiracism as a sort of habit of mind or kind of soft ideology. Not that they're wrong about every conspiracy theory that they might believe in, but that's just sort of how they process information. It's like their epistemology. So Michael, these Republican campaigners had to tailor a message to these people, and Trump just kind of played along with it. And it was always, I think, going to blow up in their faces once the rubber hit the road and they were pressed to actually make good on these promises. But Trump himself really evaded the issue.
Let me just to be really clear what your position is, and I'll get Saagar to respond. Yeah. Do you believe there's no there with regard to young girls being trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell to other powerful people, for example, Bill Clinton, potentially Donald Trump, potentially Bill Gates and others? You think there's no there with regard to those questions? And do you also believe there's no there with regard to potential intel connections, whether it's CIA or Mossad?
Yeah, so let me try to spell this out pretty carefully. I try to differentiate between what I've been referring to as Epstein mythology versus the actual factual record when it comes to Epstein. In the realm of mythology, there exists this belief, and correct me if you guys think I'm wrong, there exists this widespread belief that a pedophilic sex trafficking ring has been systematically covered up. And that Jeffrey Epstein orchestrated this pedophilic sex trafficking ring by trafficking minors to prominent third-party individuals, and then conducted a blackmail operation to coerce those individuals into silence or complicity or something. And the idea was that previously the Biden administration was maliciously covering up this information, again, to protect the likes of Bill Clinton or Bill Gates, et cetera. But now the idea is, shockingly, to the MAGA base, or the MAGA social media influencers anyway, which I'm not sure is totally synonymous with the base, but that's sort of another issue. Now, to their absolute shock, Donald Trump is apparently engaging in this very same cover-up. I would argue that the factual predicate for that assumption, which I think you guys will agree is extremely widespread, that's why people were so incensed about this issue, the factual predicate for that is not well established at all, or not nearly as established as you would think, given the confidence with which people assert the existence of that thing that they're so certain exists.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and let's go
on
ahead
the
and
intel thing. Okay.
Let's go ahead and get Saagar in, and then we'll come back and can dig more specifically into the intel.
Michael, first of all, I would point out that part of the reason that the quote-unquote factual predicate doesn't exist for what you're talking about is actually in existence, in my opinion, that if you look at the open source information for how so many of these prominent individuals dealt with Epstein, and then eventually the non-prosecution agreement that was eventually signed by Alex Acosta and Jeffrey Epstein, and eventually, of course, the Palm Beach County PD only bringing a case against him for solicitation of prostitution, actually proves that part of the reason why a lot of this stuff doesn't exist in the quote-unquote factual predicate and or DOJ documents is part of the reason why so much of this does not exist in court basis, etc. If you actually look at the information, I mean, I think Leslie Wexner is perhaps the best example for proving what you were talking about, where we have a actual high prominent individual in the year 1991, one of the only billionaires here in the United States of America, the richest man in Ohio, who gives power of attorney over to Jeffrey Epstein over his entire estate, transfers hundreds of millions of dollars worth of real estate over to him, to which Epstein then uses those properties, as you just pointed out in the factual predicate, as exists and points out in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, which, yes, is only about human trafficking between young women and Epstein himself, as in he is the sole person who is victimizing these women. That was on Wexner-related properties. That's a pretty direct example of where nobody, including Wexner himself, has ever been able to give an example of how exactly you had this extraordinary situation of signing over power of attorney. And in fact, Vicky Ward, James Stewart, the biographers who looked into this story say that many of the people around Wexner believe that it was a result of a blackmail operation. It's not that difficult to imagine that the founder of Victoria's Secret, which entails selling lingerie to teenage girls and surrounding yourselves with beautiful models and all of this, would be involved in some pretty sketchy behavior with a known pedophile of Jeffrey Epstein. So I think that's a pretty clear example, tracing all the way back from 1991, showing the ability to use and coerce, behavior, perhaps blackmail and others, to enrich himself. And also, I mean, we can get into the intelligence case now in the future, but exactly why so many people, I think rightfully, can point at an example like that and say, it's very clear, if you look at that pattern, that there is smoke there. Now, I agree, this has not yet been proven, but I would actually argue that the reason that it has not been proven is specifically to cover up the very type of behavior.
Well, that some people around Wexner may have believed, as you put it, that there was some potential explanation for Epstein's inheritance of this wealth that had to do with blackmail is not a proven factual predicate anything.
Well, nobody's saying that, but by that point, we're not supposed to take any reporting. At the end of the day, you have a multi-billionaire who signs over power of attorney for his entire estate and hundreds of millions of dollars of real estate, and it's because he thought he was a money genius. That does not happen.
I acknowledge that there are aspects to this story that are non-mythological in the sense that they really do raise questions about the mystery surrounding how he garnered his wealth and so forth. But let me give one example that I don't think has adequately penetrated the popular consciousness, nor has it been adequately covered on alternative media, maybe including this very show. Virginia Giuffre, who I think you'll agree, if you've studied this case, which I assume that you have, is the central figure who spawned the widespread belief that there had to have been this pedophilic sex trafficking network because in late 2014, she issued a court filing in which she alleged that she had been sex trafficked to a myriad of prominent third-party individuals like Prince Andrew, like the former majority leader of the United States Senate, George Mitchell, like the former governor of New Mexico, Bill Richardson, and other people. And then she also made a categorical claim that she had been trafficked to like unnamed prime ministers and other people of prominence around the world. Yeah. That's what really spawned it. And I just don't think it's disputable that Virginia Giuffre was a serial fabulist. I know people don't want to hear that. I know whenever I've commented on this subject anywhere on the internet, 95% of the comment sections are against me and they think that I'm covering up for pedophiles or something, as though I love pedophilia and that's why I'm making this argument. That's not the case. Virginia Giuffre, per the factual record, was a serial fabulist. I'm sure you know, Saagar, that she accused Alan Dershowitz,
yes, I do,
of having been one of the third-party individuals to whom she was trafficked. She made this accusation adamantly under the cover of the litigation privilege for nearly a decade. Then by 2022, because Dershowitz actually had the resources and the motivation to pursue this charge against him or to dispute it to the point of a settlement, she then had to retract and recant this signature claim that she had been making for 10 years almost, that very much animated the media coverage around this issue. She withdrew it. She totally obliterated her own credibility. And then sure enough, in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial of 2021, she was not even called as a witness by the prosecution because she would have been a nightmare under cross-examination, because so many of the things, the most salacious claims that she made around this story just do not stand up to basic scrutiny. You can even find examples of her signing on to like literal hoaxes in terms of these creeps who came out the woodwork claiming that they had the video footage of illicit sexual activity in Epstein's properties. And then Giuffre's own attorney, David Boies, who, by the way, made a killing on this whole issue. That's another thing we could get into, how basically the Epstein matter has subsidized the South Florida bar and all these feeding frenzy lawyers who have made a killing. But
well, I would argue the money went the other way, Michael. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, it goes both ways. But the defense attorneys concocted a whole strategy whereby they would extract enormous payouts for themselves.
Well, okay,
given the toxicity of the situation. Virginia Giuffre,
she's one victim. She's a very troubled individual.
Last point. Yeah. Virginia Giuffre made millions of dollars. She had a life of luxury as a result of her deciding to become this professional victim. That was her full-time job. She launched this scam NGO. I thought the right was supposed to be skeptical of NGO networks.
What is Virginia Giuffre doing right now, Michael? Do you know how it ended up?
She's deceased.
Yeah, that's right.
She's deceased.
Yeah, because her life ended
because
tragically.
She was a very troubled, unstable, individual, and unreliable person.
Look, it's not deniable she's pictured there with Prince Andrew, but to paint it only as a Virginia Giuffre is one of the only people that is saying this is just not accurate. Part of the reason
she wasn't integral to the story.
She was absolutely integral to the coverage, and largely it was because of the photo, which you're not going to deny, I hope, of her picture with Prince Andrew, which is literally what got him removed from his public duties as a member of the British royal family. Clearly, they believe, at least in some part, that Prince Andrew was involved in some pretty sketchy behavior there was his relationship with Epstein. But even let's step back further.
Yeah, the royal family was coerced through the tsunami of horrible PR that they were subject to.
What do you mean horrible
stemming
PR?
Stemming in part from that 2019
hanging out
BBC
with
interview.
a convicted sex offender, and in this case, with a 17-year-old girl with his arm around her. That's not acceptable behavior, not just for a British royal family.
He wasn't even he wasn't a convicted sex offender at the time that photo was purportedly taken.
You're right. It's routine to be hanging out with 17-year-old women and to take photos with them.
Was he a convicted sex offender at the time that photo was purportedly taken?
I'd have to check the date on what it is. But
he wasn't. It was taken purportedly in 2001.
Okay, so again,
he was not a convicted sex offender at that time.
So you're saying then in that case, case that Prince Andrew, the member of the British royal family, did not have access to the global elite in which people like Donald Trump could say on the record in 2002, before Jeffrey Epstein is convicted as a sex offender, in which he can say, Jeffrey, he likes them young, in which is an open secret, literally among the jet set class, that this type of behavior is acceptable to Harvey Weinstein and to everybody else. This is open out from Vanity Fair reporting, from a quote from Donald Trump himself. That's our current president. But beyond that, it is an open
Donald
secret.
Trump said that Jeffrey Epstein is a great guy and he tends to like the company of young women or something like that.
He likes
so does
them
that
young.
prove that Donald Trump is a sex offender?
No, I didn't say that he proves he's a
So
sex
what does it
offender.
prove?
What I'm saying is that it's open knowledge that Epstein routinely is seen and is pictured with young women at that time. By the way, and let's continue this, and this
True,
is why—
so was Donald Trump.
Pegging this entirely on Virginia Giuffre, again, is not accurate. And I think what it
Largely.
does—
I mean, she's the one who—
it is not, because, again, the photo of her with Prince
Watch
Andrew—
any of these Netflix documentaries, HBO, it's always Virginia Giuffre front and center. They never—
It made it front and center
ever
because
claim
of
that
the
she was
photo.
They never ever qualify any of their coverage by noting that she has a proven, demonstrable record of serial fabulism.
Okay.
Would you concede that she's a serial fabulist?
I would concede that she was a troubled individual who clearly, at this
serial
point,
fabulist.
from the way that her attorneys and others have acknowledged, that she did make up some facts. And I do think
So she
that
made up
reflects—
her
yeah,
most
that's right.
grandiose
I agree.
claims.
I'm
She
not
was the
relying
signal
all of this
accuser.
on Virginia Giuffre. That's my point. I have a much broader amount of evidence to point, and this is also where I think it kind of
So
gets
you don't
at.
think conceding that the most high-profile accuser, who was integral in the claim of a sex trafficking ring, insofar as her claim was that she was sex trafficked to prominent third-party individuals, I'm not contesting that Epstein himself was a sexual predator. I mean, he's on the record saying that he rejects that there should be any kind of taboo against, post-pubescent women of any age or girls of any age being accessible to men for impregnation. I mean, he had bizarre and creepy and depraved beliefs around sexual relations with minors.
So,
I'm
Michael,
not contesting that.
let me
I'm
ask you—
contesting this third-party sex trafficking ring that forms the basis
Let me ask
of why
you,
people
though—
are so outraged now about something purportedly being covered
let
up.
me ask you-
and
let
all
me
these
ask you a
elites
question,
getting away
though.
with things.
Let me ask you a question about this, Michael. How do you explain the deal he was able to cut down in Florida with Alex Acosta, who goes on to be Trump's labor secretary, who was U.S. attorney at the time, which led to him serving, I believe, 13 minutes in a county jail where the jail cell was open, where he was able to go to his office for 12 hours a day. Afterwards, he's released. There's significant reporting that indicates even, after he was supposed to be on home confinement, he's flying around, he's doing what he wants to do. That deal was so sort of outlandish that actually a judge came in and said, you violated the rights of victims. This deal was actually technically illegal. And not only did it provide for, very cushy deal and very low-level charge, ultimately for Jeffrey Epstein, it also indicated that none of his potential co-conspirators could be charged whatsoever. So how do you explain this person getting such an incredibly cushy deal at that point, and a deal, again, that allows any even theoretical co-conspirators off the hook, which is, it's so extraordinary that even Ghislaine Maxwell now is appealing to the Supreme Court saying, hey, I should have been part of that deal. What am I in prison for, since the government said no co-conspirators could ever be indicted or found guilty of anything?
I'm just not sure why people think it's such a profound mystery that a wealthy individual, whatever the source of his wealth, and I agree that if possible, a more forensic audit should be done of how he acquired his wealth. But obviously he had the means to hire a dream team of lawyers to come and negotiate with the government on his behalf. He brought in Alan Dershowitz, who had just participated in securing an acquittal for O.J. Simpson. He brought in Ken Starr to make a federalism argument to federal prosecutors, arguing that the offenses for which Epstein was accused were fundamentally state-level crimes and did not enter the purview of federal prosecutors on that ground, because the federal prosecutors couldn't establish that there was trafficking across state lines or some other element that would place the crime in their purview. Were these technical arguments? Sure. But, if you want to make this a scandal about wealthy people having access to powerful lawyers who can maybe get them a more lenient non-prosecution agreement than the average person would have access to. I'd be all on board with that, but it seems that people just immediately launch into the explanation that he must have been some kind of intelligence asset or agent. And just to touch on that for a moment, you know, Saagar, I'm not trying to personally attack you on this.
Fine. You
I happen to see, I saw a clip going around last week of you on Tucker's show in which you asserted that
Which
Alex
I corrected,
Acosta
by the way. I corrected that quote.
Okay, maybe you corrected it, but I'm just like, but a lot of people have repeated this quote.
Okay.
That derives from a 2019 Vicky Ward article in which she's quoting or she's attributing this quote from Alex Acosta from several years before 2019 when he's in a meeting with Trump transition officials. And according to Vicky Ward, a former senior Trump administration official, which sounds a lot like Steve Bannon's blowing smoke. We don't know that with 100% certainty. By the way, why is Steve Bannon sitting on 16 hours of raw, uncut Epstein footage?
We're all with you there. Yeah.
Okay. And why was he strategizing with Epstein about how he could present himself for a media interview with 60 Minutes? But anyway, we'll leave that aside for the moment. But that quote was essentially, it's like the definition of hearsay, and yet it got characterized as an on-record, like declaratory statement from Acosta of him just asserting that he had been warned that Epstein belonged to intelligence pursuant to the 2007 non-prosecution agreement, and therefore he should back off. That's not what that quote signified. And actually, several years later, post-2018, when the Miami Herald series breathed new life into the story, harnessing the power of Me Too, which, by the way, I thought the right was mostly skeptical of. Instead, on this issue and in like select circumstances, we hear the right saying, believe women, we have to honor all survivors, we can't use any critical scrutiny of their claims. But after the Me Too energy bolstered this story,
that's not true. That's not what happened.
The DOJ Office of Professional Responsibility conducted a review of the 2007-2008 non-prosecution agreement, and Alex Acosta did directly address this claim that he had once potentially asserted that Epstein belonged to intelligence, and that's why a supposedly more lenient deal was given. And Alex Acosta did deny it on the record. Now, in terms of the leniency of that deal, listen to what Dershowitz has to say. I'm not saying I agree with Alan Dershowitz on everything. In fact, I strongly disagree with him on the issue of Israel. It's odd to me that every critic of Israel now has to feel that they have to be wedded to this particular issue because their criticism of Israel is bolstered by the idea that the reason that Israel is so widely supported among power structures is because there's a pervasive sexual blackmail network. I think that kind of makes critics of Israel look rather stupid. But Dershowitz says that Epstein fired him and refused to pay his legal fees because Epstein felt that he did not get a lenient deal. He felt that the prostitution charges, state-level prostitution charges in Florida that he was required to plead guilty to were actually overly onerous, and he should not have had to be subject to any kind of state control at all. So there was a dispute over whether they were actually.
Let me respond.
It was actually lenient.
Michael, the idea that this was because of Me Too is complete bullshit. The reason why
it wasn't bolstered by it. The cultural energy of Me Too didn't empower
the U.S. District Court judge ruled that the non-prosecution agreement violated the rights of the victims who were not informed of the non-prosecution agreement, which you're portraying as standard operating procedure for some sort of rich person. That is just absolutely not the case.
When did the Miami Herald series came out?
Yes, I agree. It came out in 2018, but it was a 12-year period in which the victims themselves were not informed of the situation, sued under their rights, under the, I believe it's like the crime
so you don't
victims'
think Me
rights.
Too, I mean,
I don't exactly
Julie
remember.
Brown and Tina Brown, who have covered this issue very closely, attribute the renewed interest to Me Too.
What I'm saying is that the district court judge is the person who overturned the NPA, which is the reason why. Now, perhaps some of the motivations of perhaps coming back for your rights, it is indisputable that the rights of the victims were violated under that non-prosecution agreement. Number one, as you just pointed out in that OPR review, they said that Acosta himself exercised poor judgment whenever he came to that. Now, let's address.
But he denied the intelligence aspect.
But let's
right?
addressed that intelligence. First of all, the transcript of that has never been made public, and the way that it was phrased specifically around OPR and when they asked him about intelligence was he said, absolutely not. I did not have information that he was an intelligence asset. The way that that question, as you and I know, asked is pretty damn specific. Now let's talk about Israel as well.
No.
And no.
It was much more. Did you look at the footnote?
Yes, I did. I looked at both the footnote where he said I was allowed to address it in a classified session. He said absolutely not when asked specifically whether he belonged to intelligence.
He says
no.
He was asked whether he had knowledge of Epstein being a quote intelligence asset.
Yes,
Acosta stated to OPR that quote the answer is no. I'm not sure how much more direct he could have been.
The answer is look. I mean, I'm trying to be very specific here. I believe that the way that that question is asked in the transcript and the circumstance are pretty important.
Right in front of me.
No, but that's my point though. Is that even if you're quote he belonged to intelligence and I was told to leave it alone is not direct knowledge. These are classic non-denial denials. And in his 2019 press conference, he did not actually address it whenever he was asked on the record publicly. It's only in this OPR review that he later on comes back to it. I don't think you're going to deny in 2019 that he did not leave the door open to the fact that that report could have had some accuracy. He said something along the lines of, I wouldn't believe everything you read, but it was a non-denial denial. But at the time of that non-prosecution agreement that you're talking about, Jeffrey Epstein, by verified report, is in Israel, basically brought all of his assets over there, returns from Israel to Palm Beach in April of 2008. So that's the first, in my opinion, sketchy connection for why he's exactly granted this special status in Israel whenever he's fighting a pedophile prosecution in the United States of America. But let's just continue down that fact. And this is the part that I just don't understand. For somebody who generally looks for links, why do you have the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak flying on his plane multiple times, staying at his house for months on end, pictured when there were women there, holding a scarf in front of his face to hide his identity from the tabloids? Why is it that, JP Morgan in 2011 has to rely on Epstein to broker a meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu? Why is it that Ehud Olmert and Shimon Peres are both linked to Jeffrey Epstein? Ehud Barak was asked, how did you meet Jeffrey Epstein? I did it via Shimon Peres. Ehud Olmert is named specifically by the U.S. Virgin Islands as an Epstein associate. I mean, if we take that and then combine it here with Leslie Wexner, the fact that Jeffrey Epstein is on board of the Wexner Foundation and then pays Ehud Barak $2.3 million to complete 2 reports, one of which he never finished. I can continue back further. Here we have Jeffrey Epstein involved in multiple sketchy arms transactions from the 1980s. I mean, this is where I genuinely wonder, like, if you're just trying to be a contrarian. Do you accept it as a fact that Stephen Hoffenberg, Douglas Leese, and Adnan Khashoggi, Robert Maxwell, who, by the way, is a known Mossad agent, did not have connections with Jeffrey Epstein, in which it looks like with a source of his wealth was used as cutouts for use by the U.S. intelligence or the U.S. and Israeli intelligence community? The 4 individuals who I just named are known and linked to multiple sketchy arms deals from the 1980s. Khashoggi, Robert Maxwell, Douglas Leese, Stephen Hoffenberg. They've given on-the-record statements about their relationship with Epstein. At one point, Epstein is flying on a private jet with Douglas Leese in the 1980s when he's just 28 years old. I mean, I don't know how you can't look at that, specifically here about the money, even ignore the sex trafficking, and not saying that he did not have connections here to intelligence, or at the very least for cutouts and use as an intelligence asset in the past. I genuinely do not know how you cannot look at that, and specifically where the source of his wealth is complete bullshit. He starts a firm in 1988, J. Epstein and Associates, where he says, I only take on people with $1 billion. There are only 140, 150 people in the country, or in the world at that time, who have $1 billion under management. He's never been a registered money manager. He has no proven tax record. He called himself a, quote, high-level bounty hunter when he forms an international assets group. In what way does this not look suspicious for everything that I have just laid out there and the highest level connection to the Israeli government?
Totally get
I mean, I don't know what we're doing here.
Suspicions around this issue, but if you're saying
you want
that
people to come out and say fact, yeah, he was Mossad. That's not how it works, Michael. The CIA doesn't come out and say, yeah, we killed Kennedy. We connect all of the dots. I mean, do you believe then the official Warren? What you're saying is that because the Warren Commission said that the magic bullet theory is true, that we should all just swallow it and accept it.
So now we're going to go to a detour into the Warren Commission.
No, but what I'm saying is, you're saying, well, that's
discussing this issue.
But that's a factual predicate.
To like one coherent train of thought.
That's a factual predicate. The Warren Commission said it's been solved.
That the primary Epstein accuser is a serial fabulous.
Oh my God, you're stuck on Jimmy Gouffre. By the way, there are 2 other individuals who have named No, who
Krystal,
have
can I
named
respond now?
Prince Andrew,
Yeah.
Johanna Schoberg, and I need to find her name. One
Krystal,
second.
I mean, come on.
Caroline
how many?
Payne, who's been named here
How
in an
much can you
affidavit.
throw
Michael,
out
let
at
me
once?
go ahead and get Michael
But it's the case.
in particular,
Yeah.
you know, Saagar laid out the connections with
Yeah.
what four different Israeli
prime
ministers. You know, how do you assimilate that information? What's your response to that?
Sure. First of all, I have to just address the idea that I'm just being arbitrarily contrarian. I can't tell you how many issues I've received that accusation on over the years, whether it was the Trump-Russia story, which contained conspiratorial elements where I was accused of being a contrarian, whether it was the 2020 George Floyd riots, which I went around and critically covered the poor media coverage of. I was widely denounced for being a contrarian. I'll give you all the evidence, whether it was the war in Ukraine. This just happens to be an issue where people, I guess, more on the right now think I'm being a contrarian, and so they're particularly enraged.
I shouldn't have impugned I should not have impugned your motives, but go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so I just don't believe it's not contrarianism to critically cover how media narratives congeal in the absence of what I think to be a reliable, factual basis.
All right,
and how people
why is
believe
Epstein
stuff.
linked up with all these Israeli
I mean, you had
prime
Dave
ministers?
Smith, who I think you guys have had on to discuss this, or you had on as a regular guest, who was at the Talking Points conference and accused Donald Trump of covering up a child sex trafficking or child rape ring. I mean, Saagar, do you think that that was a credible statement? I simply don't.
I mean, okay, again, I would not.
But let me address the Israeli Israeli officials. Okay, so yes, it's not disputed that Ehud Barak, for instance, was a longtime associate of Epstein. They engaged in some business deals together. Ehud Barak, amazingly enough, was actually present when Epstein was on a media strategizing session with Steve Bannon, where they were planning how he could rehabilitate his image in the wake of the 2018 Miami Herald series. And Bannon was having to educate Epstein about how Me Too had changed cultural attitudes around this stuff. So you couldn't just be as obstinate as maybe you were able to be before in the past in rejecting some of these charges. So Steve Bannon was actually
smear the women, basically.
Yeah, you had to be more sensitive. So Steve Bannon conducted the 16 hours of preparatory interviews with Epstein to kind of tell him how he would be questioned in the context of the 60 Minutes interview or something. On the Israel connection, yes, Ehud Barak was a longtime associate of Epstein. Epstein had longtime associations with an astonishing array of people. I'm not doubting that. He was a consummate bullshitter. He had alliances with, as we know, everybody from Bill Gates to Donald Trump to Bill Clinton over the years. So does it surprise me that some of those people included the Israeli government? No. Or the Saudi arms deal stuff that he was involved in the 1980s? No. I'm not surprised about any of that. And I'm also allowing for the possibility, as I wrote in that Compact article, that over the course of his bizarre international jet setting, perhaps he did come into contact with somebody who was associated with the Israeli security services. Ehud Barak himself would have been the head of Mossad when he was prime minister.
Yes,
so is it inconceivable?
He was also the head of military intelligence.
So is it inconceivable that over the course of their meetings, Ehud Barak obtained some piece of information that maybe he passed along to somebody? No, that's not inconceivable at all. I just don't see it as dispositive or as like all-encompassingly explanatory of Epstein supposedly getting away with this child sex trafficking ring whose existence I don't regard as having been anywhere near established. You know, in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, interestingly, Maureen Comey was the prosecutor who was just fired yesterday. And she then tried to prosecute, P. Diddy, Combs, et cetera, under like similar auspices of asserting a sex trafficking ring, but like weirdly narrowing the claimed contours of the sex trafficking to two people or one person. So people hear trafficking and they think it must be this sprawling, multi-layered ring, when in reality, the grounds on which Maxwell was convicted was a sex trafficking, quote unquote, conspiracy that literally consisted of two people, according to the government and according to what the four purported victims in that trial even claimed. Oh, and by the way, those victims in that trial just received multi-million-dollar payouts from the Epstein estate and from JP Morgan. And there was a similar Deutsche Bank settlement that came out whereby they could confidentially and non-adversarially have their claims adjudicated by a mediator. So if you had any tangential connection to Epstein, or if I had any tangential connection to Epstein, of course, I would work with my lawyers who are going to get a cut to come up with a story that would entitle me to millions of dollars, just like Virginia Giuffre did to become a multi-millionaire where she could purchase luxurious
You're so focused on Virginia Giuffre. I literally
Virginia
just told
Giuffre.
you there is another. I have her name here in my notes. I've got it right
Were
here.
her claims ever
Johanna
adjudicated in a
Stover,
criminal setting?
in
Because that's
documents
where the
related
highest
to the
evidentiary
defamation suit,
standards are in
accused
place.
Prince Andrew of inappropriate sexual contact while posing for a photo at the Epstein mansion, suggesting that she was trafficked there. That's in a sworn affidavit in the very defamation case that you're talking about. Caroline B., another anonymous individual. But listen, I mean, this is my thing. Did you read the Deutsche...
called for the trial then?
Hold on. Did you read the Deutsche Bank settlement with the New York... Yes, and what does it say in there? Epstein had multiple financial transactions which broke bank rules, in which he's transferring money to Eastern European women for apparent sex trafficking purposes. It's in the fucking report there, Michael, from the New York Financial Services, in which they fined the bank for breaking its own policies, for sending and wiring money all over the world for apparent purposes after he's a convicted sex offender. I mean, you think he's wiring all of these money for hookers just for himself? Because that's not even what they say in the New York Financial Services document regarding the Deutsche Bank settlement.
But
You're
Saagar,
basically saying
if he's
people are
wiring this
doing this to
money,
get rich.
if he's trafficking, if he's participating in a trafficking conspiracy to supply minors to others, how is it that over the course of over a decade of incredibly intensive and lucrative litigation, not a single credible allegation of a third-party individual having minors trafficking them has been established? How come after every media outlet, at least post-2018, became hugely invested in this story? So you have Netflix documentaries, HBO documentaries, newspaper and magazine articles, podcasts out the wazoo. How come none of them have ever established any third-party individual to whom a minor was trafficked? Or is it because everybody is just so afraid of offending Bill Clinton?
No.
Really?
Well, no, but that's not accurate.
How
because
come they couldn't extract a lucrative settlement from Bill Clinton
Michael,
if he
the U.S. Virgin Islands,
credibly accused of having a minor trafficked?
The U.S. Virgin Islands, who has the most evidence around this because so many of the heinous accusations, I won't say crime, were committed on their soil, had an attorney general who actually was going forward with a lot of this prosecution. What happened to that attorney general, Michael? They were fired, and the current attorney general, who is in charge of the case, used to work for the Epstein estate. So that seems like a little bit of a cover-up and a problem there, no? Especially whenever that's something that happened to have been intersected in the past with exactly the lucrative dispersion of much of the Epstein estate. They have attorney generals...
Can I ask you this? Let me ask you this, Saagar.
Yeah, go ahead.
Would you concede that there is a perverse incentive or an incentive for purported self-identified victims? Because by the terms of these settlements, all the purported victims have to do is self-identify as a victim. They can do so confidentially, meaning they don't have to be cross-examined. They don't have to have their claims adversarially scrutinized, and then there's no downside reputational risk for them in the event that they're not adjudicated to be bona fide victims.
And you know why?
Would you agree that there's a perverse incentive in terms of dramatizing claims to maximize one's chances to receive the biggest possible payout? And were you aware that the four people that Maureen Comey and her fellow prosecutors had to settle on to bring forward in the Maxwell trial in 2021, receiving multi-million-dollar payouts because they were counseled by their attorneys that in order to obtain the biggest possible settlement, they should
Michael, it sounds like you think Ghislaine Maxwell should
Does
walk.
that create a perverse incentive structure here or not? Or am I crazy?
I agree that...
Am I contrarian?
I agree that it, quote, could create a perverse incentive structure. At the same time, many of these are legally justifiable because of their proven claim in a court where she was convicted by a jury of her peers.
Did you know that full-fledged adults, so not minors, adults were eligible for these payouts, and actually one adult testified at the Maxwell trial, meaning she was above legal age.
What are you saying, that nobody should ever be able to sue somebody or have legal justification whenever they are a victim of sex? Like in the case of
if we're talking about a child sex trafficking ring, then the fact that people who were adults could receive payouts because many years after the fact they could claim that
no adult should ever be able to sue anybody else. and be able to get any money for it, for damages? I mean, it's like, what are you saying? That our entire legal civil court system is false and stuff? By that standard, the ability to claim damages in itself is a perverse incentive. Now, I agree it can be weaponized, but I mean, in the Maxwell case, you're basically—
Great, we agree.
Yeah, okay, but then I don't know what to say, Michael.
Then you should support for financial gain.
Yeah, then
right?
you should support Republicans who want tort reform or whatever the fuck, that all that is.
Okay, maybe I would support tort reform around this particular issue because it's been so insanely abused.
Let me ask. We'll try to close this up. Saagar, a question for you is, one of the things that I've seen from people who say, look, there's, we believe Trump and there's no there, is they say, well, look, if the Democrats had access to this material and Trump was potentially implicated, don't you think they would have released that? What is your response to that claim?
Me or Michael?
Yeah, you, Saagar.
Okay, yeah, for me, I mean, look, I originally thought that it was actually a decent argument, but considering Trump's behavior now so far, and this is actually where I wonder if Michael would disagree with me. Michael, why not we just release all of the evidence within the FBI and within whatever the case that has from the Department of Justice, the secret indictment from 2007, which has never yet been made public, that was prior to that non-prosecution agreement, release everything that's in the case file and just show it to the American public, and we can all make up our minds. I mean, that's where maybe you'll be vindicated, Michael. Maybe it won't show any of this child sex trafficking.
Release everything.
I don't know why it can't all come out.
I agree with Dershowitz.
Okay, good.
Dershowitz said for the past 10 years, look, release everything. I waive any right to privacy. I've been falsely accused. I'm going to be vindicated, so I want maximum disclosure. I'm in favor of that, but there are two judges in New York who are keeping materials under seal. You know why? To protect the purported victims, mainly, maybe to protect others who could be defamed by those victims. So if people want to go lobby, I mean, Breaking Point should go lobby in the Southern District of New York for disclosure of the files that remain under seal. But I think the fact that Dan Bongino, I mean, Saagar, would you agree with me that Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and all these people obviously dangled these tantalizing little tidbits in front of the right-wing social media audience on the idea that Trump was going to storm into office with his most loyal, tenacious soldiers and expose the deep state, demonic, sex trafficking Democrats. And that whole narrative was obviously politically expedient, bullshit that they very cleverly used to gin up excitement to vote Republican in 2024. And it wouldn't necessarily translate to any concrete revelations once Republicans got into power. The idea that there was a consolidated Epstein list that the DOJ has in some vault somewhere that they could just release was always kind of a confabulation to get people all exercised.
I'm on the record here, Michael. I completely agree with you for the political expedience purposes, but I don't agree that it's bullshit. When I have also said it's a canard to say that there's some Epstein client list where it's like, hey, fucked a kid, now supports Israel. That's not the way that documents work.
Peddling a canard.
Look, I'm not here to defend Kash Patel. I agree with you completely that the way that they frame, look, there's two options. They either ginned it up and exploited perhaps what they claim is the rape of thousands of children or hundreds of victims or whatever for politically expedient purposes, or if they did that, which is disgusting, or they are covering up said thing, which is equally disgusting, perhaps more so, actually, on the latter
I would love for them, I totally agree. I would love for the maximum amount of material to come out, because you know
FBI
what? When Virginia Giuffre, who you happily conceded was a serial fabulous.
No, I didn't say that. I said that she's a troubled woman who, yes, has been proven to have lied.
So now you don't agree that she was a serial fabulous?
I didn't. No, I'm not going to use your level of framing, which I actually do frankly think is disgusting because it points her as the central character, which you've self-appointed. It ignores the other individuals
She's
who
the one who introduced the whole sex trafficking theory.
Yes, with
2014.
With the photo of Prince Andrew. It's like the photo exists.
Virginia
the photo exists.
Go ahead, finish your point.
Okay, so I mean, I agree that a maximum disclosure should be made, and that these concealments that are still in place to protect the supposed accusers, many of whom are serial fabulists, but yet received enormous payouts from these settlement funds that don't even scrutinize claims. Because when that scrutiny was applied to Virginia Giuffre, as more and more information had to be revealed, she had to concede that she just made an enormous amount of stuff up.
We got the Virginia Giuffre thing.
And so I think that would probably pertain
she lived
to
in
others
such a life of expedient luxury. It's just whatever. All right, continue.
She did not live a life of luxury. She didn't have an oceanfront mansion in Australia and a ranch, and she didn't make $15 million.
She committed suicide, bro. This is what I'm saying.
Let me.
It was so great for her that she decided to enter. I mean, I don't know.
Well, yeah, because she had a domestic,
because
because she got, according to her estranged husband, she became increasingly violent and attacked him. The local Australian authorities agreed with the husband, and then she lost custody of her children and became distraught.
I mean,
could that maybe reflect on her credibility? Could that maybe give some insight into why she was not called as a witness in the Maxwell trial?
That reflects to me a pattern of behavior of somebody who was obviously, in my opinion, abused whenever she was young and as a child, and that's
Did she lack credibility?
So, Michael, let me wrap up with
She
this.
obviously did, Saagar. I know it's like it's difficult to admit because
I
you're accused of like re-victimizing victims.
I just
it's beyond the realm of doubt.
I'm not going to sit here and besmirch somebody who killed herself and who obviously was a troubled individual.
She fabricated a claim against a prominent individual for almost a decade.
Okay. All right. Your feelings are clear. So are mine. All right. Go ahead.
Michael, a final question here for you. How do you explain the fact that you had the Trump administration go from the big influencer phase 1 Epstein files coming out, we're reviewing Pam Bondi's, I'm reviewing thousands of hours of footage, to 2-page memo, nothing to see here, we're moving on, case closed, to Trump now saying, well, there are files that were created by Obama and Hillary and Comey and Brennan, and it's all a hoax. And, that everyone needs to move on and there's nothing to see here. So how do you explain his specifically changing narrative of what's going on here? And, the fact that obviously it seems bizarre the way he's handling this in the worst possible way just for him politically, let alone anything else.
Well, I mean, I think people in the right-wing media universe are charlatans, and they exploit their charlatanism to politically expediently cater to this long-standing belief
I'm talking about Trump specifically.
No, I know, I got it, but it leads into Trump. Meaning there's like a pervasive, ever-present belief within right-wing media circles whom Trump harnesses for political power that there's a pedophilic sex trafficking ring that's perpetually waiting to be uncovered. That's why they were so into QAnon, Pizzagate, and that kind of transferred over in part to Epstein. Well, but it explains it in that, like, why did Pam Bondi in that now notorious February 2025 interview with Fox News say she had the Epstein files waiting on her desk? Because there was an incentive within this milieu to dangle the most appetizing little snippets in front of the audience. Like the beating heart of right-wing social media and like comment sections always believes that the triumphant anti-deep state warriors in the Trump administration are finally going to unveil the true heart of evil at the core of elite networks and expose the pedophiles. Kash Patel said, put on your big boy pants and tell us who the pedophiles are. And so Bondi was kind of playing into that assumption, and she used like imprecise language. Are these people charlatans? You're not getting an argument from me. Yeah. I was trying to make this argument like last year when they were pumping out this stuff for their own electoral advantage. Now, I will say, is there a possibility that there are some additional materials somewhere that could be embarrassing to Trump? Of course, we know that he was a friend of Jeffrey Epstein's for like 15 years. Jeffrey Epstein is on tape that was released by Michael Wolff saying, I'm Donald Trump's closest friend, or I was his closest friend. Now, could that be puffery by Epstein, who loved to exaggerate his influence?
Trump also said he knew him for 15 years. So
yeah, exactly. So I mean, there could be something that is embarrassing on Trump somewhere in the archives here. That wouldn't be surprising at all. Michael Wolff claims that Epstein displayed to him like pictures or Polaroid photos of Trump like sitting around with like topless young women or something. And there was no claim that those women in the photos were minors, but like Trump was also in these modeling circles. That's how he met Melania, right? And Epstein also,
Michael, I just got to point out, man, this is the same hearsay that you're indicting the intelligence quote. You're like, oh, Michael Wolff. By the way, Michael Wolff is a fucking serial fabulous. Are we going to sit here and not say that? He literally made shit up in his book, In Fury. Why is it that the secondhand account here from Michael Wolff
I'm not saying
is
it's
worth it?
dispositive.
No, but it is. Now you're talking, he's got photos of a topless woman.
That's not. it's not.
I'm not
it's
saying
not
it's
hearsay.
dispositive. By the way,
it's not
I would-
hearsay for Michael Wolff to say I was shown this photo. Like he could testify in court to that. He couldn't testify in court that he was told by somebody that somebody else told him
Michael Wolff
that they spoke to Alex
all right.
Acosta 2 years prior to that. So it's a different level of hearsay. I'm not saying it's dispositive.
It's reported. Yeah, fine. But I'm just saying it's the
Michael
same
Wolff
standard.
has shown that he has recordings of Epstein.
Yeah,
he
sure.
has hours of tape.
Vicky Ward has multiple quotes on the record from Epstein. Why is she a worse report? By the way, Vicky Ward has 10 times
I'm not claiming
credibility.
that Trump is a sexual predator. I'm arguing against that assumption now that has overtaken these popular assumptions.
All right.
So I mean, I'm not trying to argue that Trump is a sexual predator.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I'm saying you're willing to take hearsay and reporting from other people when it's convenient for your
Here's
point.
the Occam's razor that I tend to use with Trump. Obviously, he'll just launder whatever bullshit he can to get through a current controversy. And the way that he's handled this issue is really amazing. I mean, now he's like voluntarily bringing it up when he calls into these right-wing, like Real America's Voice shows and saying Epstein hoax. He's disowning his supporters over it. So obviously, I don't know, like, does he have the presence of mind to know how to negotiate this story in a way that is befitting him? Maybe not. I mean, he's 78 years old now. So that could be an explanation. It is interesting to me that never once do you hear Trump express sympathy for the quote unquote victims. Like a traditional politician would say, we sympathize with the victims. They've been through trauma. We're not going to re-traumatize them. This horrible person, Epstein, was a pedophile and a disgrace and whatever. Like Trump doesn't even make any perfunctory gestures along those lines. He just like goes nuclear now on his own supporters. So is he handling this artfully? No, but like I think there are some, more simple explanations than, oh, that means he's covering up the child rape ring that people accused Democrats of covering up, and now Trump is following suit. I just don't find that to be that plausible.
All right, Michael, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Okay, and one more thing. Like, okay, I know this got a little heated, and it's nothing. It's genuinely nothing personal against Saagar.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm waiting for the avalanche of comments denouncing me, and that's fine.
To quote whoever it was, Dan Bongino, I think we all have our big boy pants on here, so no worries.
It's all good, brother.
All
See you
right,
later.
Michael, good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching, guys. We appreciate it. We will see you all tomorrow for the Friday show.